Chapter 61. Can't find the recommended section on mobile. Unfortunately, my recommendation only appears under the comic adaptations column on the desktop site. I've never used the mobile version, so I can't locate it there, but I sincerely hope it's available somewhere. Chapter 62. Evil Hawklap. Under the afternoon sun, Ryan glanced over at Kate, who was still sulking and couldn't help rolling his eyes. "So, are we just going to let the girls play games the whole time?" he asked with exaggerated boredom, stifling a yawn. "We still have nearly the entire afternoon ahead of us. If we sit around like this, it's going to be a drag." Kate said nothing, staring off into the distance. Ryan grinned and shrugged. "Fine, girls' games it is," he said, feigning surprise. Kate shot him a sidelong look, then quickly pretended she hadn't heard him. Ryan clapped his hands 3 times, loud enough to snap Kate's attention back to him. "Tell me," he said, "what do you make of this?" With a fluid motion, he plucked a small, dark brown creature out of thin air at his right side. The thing was roughly 7 inches tall, slim and elf-like, but completely wingless. It thrashed wildly in Ryan's palm, emitting high-pitched squeals, though it was held fast by what looked like invisible strands of webbing. Kate's sulk melted away, replaced by sheer curiosity. She leaned forward, studying the little beast's knobby horns and gnarled expression. "It's got to be an imp," she ventured. "They prefer damp, soft habitats, riverbanks, marshes, that sort of place." She frowned, tilting her head. "But imps of this variety are supposed to be native only to Great Britain and Ireland. How on earth did one end up here?" Kate crouched beside the glass enclosure, wand raised. "I've seen ones like this at my cousin's house," she murmured, observing the creature's coal-black hide. With a flick of her wand, she coaxed a stray moth toward the little beast. It snatched the insect midair and devoured it in a single gulp. Ryan watched, an amused smile flickering at the corner of his lips. "That'll do nicely," he said. "This is what we call, somewhat affectionately, the little devil. It first arrived in Britain during the colonial expeditions in India." He tapped the side of the enclosure, and the creature scuttled to the edge, sniffing at the air for more prey. Kate raised an eyebrow. "So what exactly is its favorite food?" Ryan grinned, leaning closer. "Hint number 1. It's classified as an X-rated dangerous magical creature." He paused for dramatic effect, but before he could continue, Kate shot back. "Come on, give me something more. This is basic care of creatures stuff." "All right." Ryan relented. "Hint number 2. This creature's most coveted delicacy is none other than the humble flobber caterpillar." Kate's face lit up. "Flobber caterpillars? Of course." She turned to the rest of the group. "So, who can tell me, what magical beast absolutely adores flobber caterpillars?" A greenhouse debate. Sunlight filtered through the greenhouse's leaded windows, dancing across rows of exotic plants. Kate was kneeling beside a particularly vigorous hawklap, her robe smeared with potting soil as she pried at its tangled roots. She paused when Ryan's voice drifted through the foliage. "What's Hawklap's most famous illusion?" he asked, leaning casually against the potting bench. Then, with a smirk, he added, "Oh, and just so you know, I can't cure you." Kate shot to her feet, kneeling forgotten. "You can't cure me?" she repeated, though the glare in her eyes said she knew he was teasing. Ryan shrugged, ruffling his hair. "I thought a little challenge might lighten the mood." She crossed her arms. "Fine. Hawklap is notorious for its subterranean tentacles, rhizomes that burrow through soil hunting earthworms. It reproduces so aggressively it can overrun a garden in days." Kate unfolded her arms and tapped the rim of her robe. "Goblins covet its sweet tubers." "True enough," Ryan conceded. "But in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, Newt Scamander famously dismissed Hawklap as goblin fodder." Kate's eyes sparkled. "That was his mistake. Its juice is a prime base for healing potions. We dissected its properties in Professor Smethwick's potions class last term." He laughed and tousled her hair. "You're absolutely right, and impressate, very well-informed. But that goblin cuisine anecdote isn't the most famous Hawklap reference in the British wizarding world." Kate blinked, incredulous. "Impossible. What could be more famous?" Ryan's grin widened as the afternoon light glinted off the leaves around them. "You're about to find out." Kate's heart skipped a beat. "How is that possible?" Ryan leaned against the doorframe of the cabin, a sly grin tugging at his lips. "Kate, have you ever seen a hawklap?" he asked. Kate frowned. "A hawklap? she echoed, shaking her head. Picture this, Ryan continued, his voice low and playful. A fleshy pink mushroom covered in black, needle-sharp bristles. Kate wrinkled her nose. That sounds disgusting. Believe it or not, Ryan said, still smirking, Albus Dumbledore's Aunt Honoria once broke off her engagement because she caught her fiancé playing with a whole litter of hawk-clap pups. He paused for dramatic effect, and Dumbledore himself later admitted in an interview his exact words were, "Hawk-claps are pink, spiky, mushroom-like creatures. I can't understand why anyone would want to cuddle them." Kate's eyes widened. Really? Ryan leaned closer, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. But here's the kicker. Didn't Dumbledore have that intense relationship with Grindelwald? At once, Kate's face turned a brilliant shade of red. Ryan, you. Without waiting for more, she spun on her heel and dashed inside her cabin, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. From behind it came her triumphant shout, "I win again." Alone in the corridor, Ryan exhaled with a wry chuckle, and then winced as he smacked his palm against his thigh in frustration. Damn, he muttered to himself. Even in this life, he realized he was far too straightforward. No wonder he'd ended up single in his last one. If I hadn't returned in time, armed with all the knowledge of my future self, and admittedly a far more handsome face, I'd have been doomed to solitude forever. Meanwhile, Ryan made no move to track down Kate again. By now, Gonghua was likely on his deathbed. He lounged in an ornate chair in Smith Castle's Grand Hall, watching a phoenix streak past in a blaze of crimson and gold. Then that cold, mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. "Master, what are your orders?" "Master Ryan, any instructions for Jack?" With a sharp crack, Jack the house elf materialized at Ryan's side, his twisted features contorted in a petulant scowl. "Master Ryan," Jack complained, "just tell Jack that strange artifact can't do anything." In that instant, I realized how much my future self had already arranged. Jack's grumbling saved us a mountain of work. As aggravating as he was, it was better to have a disgruntled Jack than a cursed one. And at his age, a quiet afternoon would do him far more good than meddling with unknown magic. Ryan, whose aura still flickered like phoenix fire, let out a long sigh. "All right, Jack. Did the letter arrive?" He glanced around, frustration etched across his face. He'd already canceled the tracking spell on Kate. She'd escaped to India. And if Penelope had dispatched an owl with news of her own, that poor bird was probably collapsing from exhaustion by now. Jack stepped forward and bowed. "Master Ryan, your letter." Ryan accepted the thick crimson parchment, its seal embossed with a stylized maple leaf. With a flick of his wand, the envelope peeled itself open, revealing a neatly written letter and a small photograph. He examined the photograph first, a group of 4 standing beneath the Eiffel Tower. Penelope stood in front, beaming. Behind her, a bald man in a crisp suit and a poised, slightly plump blonde woman rested their hands affectionately on Penelope's shoulders. Ryan's brow furrowed. Those must be her parents. He unfolded the letter, written in flowing, elegant script. Penelope gushed about the soaring interest in French alchemy. She'd even met a fellow enthusiast named Furong, who claimed to know every French alchemic treatise by heart. Between updates on her Parisian adventures, she casually asked about his own holiday plans. Ryan murmured, "Fleur Delacour?" The name sprang to mind, though it made little sense. Penelope was a Muggle-born, after all. And hadn't Fleur sat in Ravenclaw during the Triwizard Tournament? That was years after Penelope graduated. Something didn't add up. Suppressing his curiosity, Ryan dipped his quill and began his reply. He assured Penelope he'd spend the holidays quietly at home, no grand travels this year. Then, with characteristic bluntness, he reminded her that, despite current excitement, French alchemy still trailed British traditions. Without Nicolas Flamel's discoveries and the backing of the British ministry, France's recent alchemic renaissance would never have occurred. The surge in popularity? He suspected it owed far more to the French Ministry of Magic's hefty funding than to any inherent French genius. Otherwise, Beauxbaton could never have afforded the lavish laboratories she'd been praising. With that, he sealed the letter and sent it soaring back to Paris, his mind already turning over the mystery of Penelope's new acquaintance and the curious mention of Fleur. Nicolael had also mastered the secrets of the Philosopher's Stone, granting him the power to transmute ordinary materials into solid gold. Discreetly, he funneled his newfound wealth back to his alma mater. Although the British Ministry of Magic dared not cut Hogwarts professors' salaries outright, it scoured every paper trail for a polite excuse to trim the school's budget, most notably by reducing funds for flying lessons and other activities. In the end, alchemy became so costly that it was restricted to sixth-year students and removed entirely from the OWL curriculum. Chapter 63. Poseidon Ryan traced the final flourish of his reply with a swirl of fiery magic. When the glowing letters faded, he handed the parchment to Jack. "Please see that this goes off immediately," he said, and the ever-reliable courier nodded. As for communicating with the Lord God, Ryan simply left his mind open. No messenger or ink required. Half a world away in India, on a secluded stretch of the famed zombie trail, a stone platform rose from the still waters of a forest lake. 2 weathered recliners sat atop it, and as Ryan opened his eyes, his phoenix form dissolved like morning mist. His little imp companion, having played its part, scurried off toward the tree line, though Ryan could still sense it, munching contentedly on a trapped insect as if it were sugarcane. Kate sat in the other chair, her back to him, engrossed in some ancient tome. The only sounds were cicadas droning in the heat and water lapping softly against the rock. At midday a servant appeared, balancing a tray laden with bowls of steaming curry, creamy dal, spicy aloo gobi, and a robust goat stew, alongside a generous mound of fragrant long-grain rice. Ryan inhaled the rich aromas, then eyed the drink the servant had poured for them both, a vividly colored fruit tea, streaked with limp strips of soaked fruit that looked suspiciously like soggy cigarette filters. He took a cautious sip, set the glass down, and offered Kate a wry smile. "Well, at least it's eye-catching." That morning, as the soft light filtered through the trees, Kate took a sip of the fruit tea Ryan had just prepared, and was pleasantly surprised by how good it tasted. With a mischievous grin, Ryan lifted his wand. The assorted fruits began to peel themselves from the tea, levitating into the air. The water in the cup froze in midstream, sculpting itself into a crystalline bird. Delicately, the fruit slices arranged themselves into colored feathers, and there, perched on the rim, was a perfect augury fashioned from ice and fruit. Kate, riding down the gentle slope on a sleepy donkey, blinked at the little bird. "Huh? What's that?" she asked, her voice still heavy with morning drowsiness. "An Irish phoenix," Ryan declared proudly. "An augury." Kate shook her head, smiling. "Nope, you've got it backwards. An augury is like a gaunt vulture, dark green feathers, a razor-sharp beak, definitely not a fiery phoenix." Ryan shrugged good-naturedly. "All right, smarty, tell me this. What are augury feathers used for? A potion ingredients or B quill pens?" Kate hopped off her donkey, brandishing a chicken drumstick in one hand as she pointed at Ryan. "They make quill pens," Ryan blurted out confidently. Kate threw her head back in playful triumph. "Wrong again. Augury feathers repel ink, so you could never use them as quills. They're prized for potion making, yes, but you'd be wasting a perfectly good feather if you tried to dip it in ink." Ryan laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. Kate took another bite of her drumstick, and the two of them continued down the hill, her holding court on magical creatures, him plotting his next ill-fated guess. "Ryan, let me teach you," Professor Kate said, wagging her finger for emphasis. The augury is an exceptionally timid magical creature that builds its nest in the shape of a teardrop woven from thorny twigs. It's classified as dangerous by the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. Its diet includes insects, flies, and occasionally small fairies. Curiously, it only takes flight during heavy downpours. You'll find auguries native to the woodlands of the United Kingdom and Ireland and in scattered pockets across northern Europe. For centuries, wizards believed that the augury's high-pitched wail signaled imminent death, so they steered clear of its nest. Modern research, however, shows that the bird only cries out when a storm is approaching. Because of this trait, some witches and wizards keep an augury at home as a living weather gauge. But once winter sets in and rain becomes constant, they must cast a soundproofing charm on its enclosure. Otherwise, the creature's unrelenting cries would drive anyone mad overnight. By the way, Ryan, you know that eccentric historical figure you can't stand, Uric? One winter, he was so unnerved by an augury's wailing that he became convinced he was dead and took to haunting the halls like a ghost. Then a funny thing happened. Uric came home that morning, completely convinced he'd turned into a ghost, and promptly walked straight into a wall. His panicked screams alerted the wizard next door, who rushed him off to the St. Magnus Hospital for magical ailments. By the end of the day, word had spread that Uric lay unconscious with a concussion and wouldn't stir for 10 days. Teacher Kate leaned back in her recliner, folding her arms with a satisfied nod. Well, he got exactly what he deserved. Who told him to cram 50 auguries into one enclosure without even reading their habits first? Her voice took on that familiar no-nonsense edge. Ryan, tell me, what have you learned from this little adventure? Ryan looked eager to please. Always do your homework before you decide to keep a pet. Exactly, Kate said, a hint of a smile softening her stern expression. And not just with animals. Before you try anything new, do your homework. Understood? Crystal clear, Kate. Ryan agreed, dropping his gaze so earnestly that the corners of Kate's mouth twitched with approval. With that settled, the rest of the evening passed without incident. After dinner, Ryan tugged Kate aside to double-check their alibi. Both had been at home all day, no chance for Penelope to sneak off anywhere. Satisfied, Kate ruffled his hair, and they spent the next hour playing board games until the sky outside the window faded from gold to lavender. Suddenly, Ryan froze mid-move, eyes widening. Huh? He whispered. And in that moment, neither of them noticed the silent flutter of wings gathering just beyond the glass. The sky was fading toward dusk, yet not a bird stirred overhead. Kate stood on the broad stone dais at the camp center, her satchel and spellbooks neatly set beside her, scanning the empty sky. Suddenly, the stone beneath her feet trembled. The long dining table, even as its enchanted mechanism whisked away their plates, creaked and began to sink into the dais. Instinctively, Kate sprang to safety. Ryan, ever confident, slipped his wand and notes into his coat pocket as the table vanished entirely beneath the platform. In its place, a spiral staircase wound down into pitch-black nothingness. At first it seemed to drop straight into the Earth's core. Ready? Ryan called, offering his hand. Welcome to our new, or should I say, subaqueous, gateway to the Bermuda Triangle, the palace under the sea, Poseidon. Poseidon, Kate echoed, taking his hand. She stepped onto the top stair and peered downward. It's almost like a Muggle submarine. Ryan only smiled. No magical slide spell carried them along, only the soft echo of their footsteps as they descended. 1, 2, 1, 2. The darkness pressed in then, without warning, peeled away. They emerged into a cathedral of crystal. The floor and walls were transparent, revealing the lake bed below in ghostly silver light. Schools of fish glided past like living clouds, and rings of moonlight shimmered on the water's surface far above. Kate inhaled, awestruck. Beneath them lay an underwater palace, an enchanted vessel carved from glass and stone, and beyond its walls waited the mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle. Beneath the lake's surface, water plants drifted softly in the gentle currents, and schools of fish wove through their swaying fronds. The most arresting sight was a lemora fish, its silver scales sparkling in the refracted sunlight, drawing Ryan and Kate's gaze as though they'd stepped into a vast underwater aquarium. Then, as if by magic, the staircase behind them dissolved into mist, and a door formed out of the surrounding water, swinging open with a quiet, resonant creak. A short figure emerged, a dwarf wizard whose delicate features hinted at fairy blood. He gave a respectful bow. Mr. Ryan, Miss Kate, welcome to Poseidon. He led them forward and explained the enchantment that shaped this place. In your private quarters, simply speak the name Thetis, after the Greek sea goddess, and the transparent walls and floor will solidify, revealing a living room, bathroom, and bedroom. Each room features its own window, offering a view of the surrounding lake. When you wish to make the walls vanish again, utter Thetis once more, and privacy will return at your command. He warned them, no spellcasting in the bedroom, and even referenced the so-called deep-sea phobia theory advanced by Muggle scholars. With that final caution, the illusion dissolved, returning the suite to its ordinary form. Before them lay a living room washed in ocean blues, its walls traced with gentle wave motifs. The sofa, shaped like living coral, was astonishingly plush. Before Ryan and Kate could speak, the dwarf wizard produced 2 elegant cards, each stamped with Thetis' seal. In case you forget the password, he explained, offering one to each of them. They looked more like exclusive spa passes than keys to a hidden realm. With a polite bow, the dwarf stepped through a shimmering doorway that appeared in midair and vanished. This is the horror journey's greatest promise, absolute privacy. From Vampire Castle to the winding zombie trail and even the depths of Poseidon's kingdom, no surveillance could reach them. Staff would only re-emerge when it was time to move on. No wonder, given that every wand wielder here was as formidable as an army, their true powers masked by friendly faces. I sat perfectly still, the only sound my own steady breathing. It was deathly quiet. Thankfully, my ears still worked. It wasn't dinner time yet, so I lingered on the plush coral sofa, gazing through the windows at the ever-darkening sea around us. We'd clearly descended far below the sunlit zone, and only the faintest shafts of light pierced the water. Strange, nameless fish drifted past the Poseidon as if they'd never noticed our presence. Ideal, since an inquisitive squid or two could have derailed the entire mission. "Ryan, do you remember what it looked like when everything went transparent just now?" Kate asked, her head resting against his left arm. He gave a half smile. Not really. He'd already guessed her next move. Standing up gracefully, Kate lifted her chin and intoned, "Thetis." Abruptly, the cabin plunged into darkness. Not a single thing was visible. For a moment, I wondered whether the spell had worked. Then, little pinpricks of soft light winked to life on the ceiling. The room was dimly illuminated once more, and the couch was still sitting there, stubbornly resisting Kate's magic. Ryan pressed his forehead against the submarine's observation port and stared into an alien realm. Below them drifted grotesque, bioluminescent life forms, bulbous anglerfish dangling eerie lanterns, and razor-toothed viperfish bristling like living spears. It felt as though they'd slipped into another planet. Beside him, Kate gripped the armrests in a half-thrill, half-dread haze. The research submersible Poseidon raced forward through the pitch-black water, its powerful spotlights barely keeping pace with the creatures darting out of its path. Each time they almost collided, the beasts recoiled with uncanny reflexes, yet Kate hardly registered the near misses, so absorbed was she in the spectacle. Suddenly, Ryan's eyes widened. A massive sperm whale, the survivor of countless battles with giant squid, its scarred hide a roadmap of past wounds, glided into view. Under the Poseidon's lights, that wounded colossus seemed suspended in a velvet void, as if it had swum straight out of a dark cosmos. Kate's heart pounded. She slid off the bench and collapsed onto the sofa. "Thetis!" she cried, voice trembling. Instantly, the external feed displays dimmed, and the surrounding gloom gave way to the familiar safety of the submarine's control room lights. Shaking, Kate leaned toward Ryan. What were those creatures? And why is the seabed down there so impenetrably black? Kate's eyes widened in awe as she looked around the dimly lit cavern. "Ryan, this is the deep sea, where the sun can't reach." Ryan smiled, gently clasping her small hand. "That's right. Most of these creatures never come to the surface. I can't even name half of them." His thumb brushed hers, and in that brief, tender moment, they felt an unexpected closeness. Was this the famous suspension bridge effect at work? A soft chime echoed through the cavern. Dinner was served, the flat stone table before them, empty just moments ago, now brimmed with an otherworldly feast. The familiar aroma of curry still hung in the air, but the ingredients had transformed. Lobsters as thick as forearms, gleaming octopus tentacles curled alongside seaweed-flavored rice. It was a meal as exotic as their 100-galleon voyage promised to be. Ryan couldn't help but marvel at the cost of some local specialties. A pint of 8-eyed giant spider venom alone went for a full 100 galleons. Granted, much of this bounty was harvested nearby, some of it perhaps even free, but every stage of their trip had been more spectacular than the last. He took a careful bite of curry and explained, "In the wizarding world, we use 3 coins, gold galleons, silver sickles, and copper nuts. 17 sickles equal 1 galleon, and 29 nuts make a sickle, so a single galleon is worth 493 nuts. He glanced at Kate, amused. "I just learned that 5 pounds sterling will get you 1 galleon these days." Kate laughed softly, eyes shining in the bioluminescent glow. As they passed dishes back to Kay and forth, the deep-sea cavern felt less like the ocean's abyss and more like a shared secret, a world all their own. Before Ryan time-traveled, the horror show tour cost 500 British pounds, about 4,251.85 cents at today's exchange rate. Of course, that isn't how he figures it, since he's stuck in 1988 and clueless about historical rates. Like most tourists and non-economics majors, he just uses the 2021 rate. A better measure, though, is to price things by their purchasing power in the wizarding world. Consider what Harry and his friends paid for everyday items on their Hogwarts Express journey. Snacks, 11 sickles, 7 nuts. Night bus ticket, 11 sickles. 3 cups of butterbeer, 6 sickles. The advanced potion-making textbook, 9 galleons. Yes, more expensive than a wand. Using the rate implied by those prices, 1 galleon, 255, 1 sickle, 15, and 1 newt, or 0.05, here's the math. Harry's train car snacks, 11 sickles, 7 nuts, cost about 168. 1 butterbeer runs roughly 30. The potions textbook, a whopping 2,295. Even Harry's 7-galleon wand would be about 1,785. That means each person's total Harry Potter trip, train snacks, bus fare, butterbeers, textbooks, and wand, easily exceeds 10,000. By comparison, the Weasleys in the original stories really were living hand-to-mouth. Ryan couldn't help but shake his head at the Weasleys' legendary thrift, or, more accurately, their complete lack of it. Take Arthur, for example. He'd plunked down 50 galleons on a wrecked Muggle car purely for the thrill of tinkering with it. He spent weeks retrofitting the engine, rewiring the ignition, and enchanting the whole thing with all manner of protective charms. By the time he was done, it looked and sounded like nothing Hogwarts had ever seen. Then there was Percy, hardly the most indulgent of his siblings, who somehow wound up gambling 10 galleons, worth over 2,000 nuts, with Penelope Clearwater, of all people. In true Percy fashion, he backed out of the wager at the last minute, leaving Penelope fuming and everyone else utterly unsurprised. If there were a Weasley least likely to shirk a responsibility, you'd have thought it would be Percy. Yet there he was, proving himself the most un-Weasley Weasley of them all. Fred and George, on the other hand, stayed true to family form. They emptied their startup fund on a flutter with Ludo Bagman, and against all odds, turned a tidy profit. By the spring of Harry's 3rd year, also Fred and George's 5th, they had saved exactly 37 galleons, 15 sickles, and 3 nuts. That's roughly 9,600 nuts altogether, which they promptly blew on new joke shop supplies the moment Ludo flatly refused to lend them any more money. It occurred to Ryan that this free and easy spending was a Weasley tradition. When the twins won 700 galleons in that daily profit contest, they almost immediately booked a family trip to Egypt. The car, Arthur's marvelous Muggle contraption, packed roof-high with embroidered robes and cauldrons, set off for the pyramids the very next week. As he watched all this unfold, Ryan's thoughts drifted to Dobby. The house elf earned 1 galleon a week at Hogwarts, barely 1,000 nuts a month. Yet Albus Dumbledore had offered to pay him 10 galleons per week once Dobby was freed, raising his income to over 10,000 nuts a month. Even more than the students and staff, the school itself was astonishingly wealthy, nestled on its hilltop, like a vault brimming with gold. But when it came to the Weasleys, it didn't matter how much, or how little, they had. The moment a galleon landed in their hands, it vanished in a whirlwind of good intentions, spirited gambles, and grand adventures. In the Weasley household, saving money wasn't exactly a cherished virtue. Spending it, however, was another matter entirely. Ryan stared at the figures dancing through his mind. Harry Potter's 4th-year Triwizard Prize, 1,000 galleons, roughly $200,000. Sirius Black's bounty, 10,000 galleons, about $2 million. A grin crept across his face. He was rich. Rich enough, he thought, to break Black out of Azkaban without anyone noticing, then turn him right back in for the reward. I already have the money, he muttered, as if confessing a guilty secret. He straightened his robes and forced a noble expression. Honestly, Sirius is innocent. At worst, he was a reckless youth. Yet the more he stared at Black's shadowy reputation, the more he disliked him. Why the sudden contempt? Ryan slapped a hand to his forehead. It must be because I'm too upright, too quick to judge, he huffed, eyes distant. And it's all about purchasing power. If I hadn't gone back in time, my first-year salary after college wouldn't even come close to Dobby's wages. He shook his head as if dismissing a headache. Just a miscalculation. Forget it, Black. Let it go. He paused, then added with a self-satisfied air, I am such an upstanding wizard. Kate, standing beside him, watched this display of self-righteousness with raised eyebrows. She reached into her pocket and produced a small, emerald-green slip of parchment. With a straight face, she tossed it at Ryan. Here, 50% off at St. Mungo's. Who wants it? Ryan blinked at the coupon, all grand declarations evaporating into thin air. The two of them stood there in silence, the absurdity of the moment hanging between them like mist over the lake. Ryan tossed the coupon back onto the table. Come on, just eat, he urged, plucking a lobster claw dripping in curry sauce and gently pressing it into Kate's mouth. Kate blinked in surprise, cheeks flushing as she nibbled around the shell, trying not to sputter. The curry's spicy heat spread across her tongue, but she swallowed obediently, glaring at Ryan the whole time. A mischievous grin spread across his face. He leaned in, voice low and playful, and whispered the incantation again. Across the table, Thetis watched the scene unfold, eyes soft with fondness. She admired Kate's perseverance. Even when curry sauce dripped down her chin, Kate refused to show defeat. Chapter 65. Mermaid. Deep-sea phobia, huh? Ryan leaned back in his chair, arching an amused eyebrow. Sir Kate forced a calm expression. She picked at her platter as the lights dimmed, until only the cool blue glow bathing the table remained. Around them, the grand dining hall dissolved into shadow, save for a single watchful overhead lamp. Ryan's grin widened. He clearly relished every moment of her discomfort. Kate refused to play along. She bent over her meal as if nothing had changed, determined not to let his trickery unnerve her. With each spoonful, she steeled herself against the urge to break the silence, confident that even the cunning vampire hunter could not outlast her willpower. For all his bluster, Ryan needed an audience to feed his pride, and she would not give him that satisfaction. After a stretch of tense quiet, Ryan sighed and spoke a single word. Thetis. Immediately, the shadows retreated, the ornate walls of the hall reappearing, and the blue glow fading into the normal, warm candlelight. All signs of his phantom abyss vanished. Kate dabbed her lips with a linen napkin and lifted her chin. What, no more games? She asked, her tone light but triumphant. At her gesture, the enchanted dining table flickered. The platters and goblets lifted into the air and then vanished, leaving only a simple porcelain teapot filled with steaming black tea. Ryan swirled the cup in his hand. I think this table uses a kind of peephole illusion, he mused, voice low. You know, project images into your mind, trick your senses. Clever trick for a dinner party. Kate allowed herself a small smile. Very clever, but next time, try something a little less nautical. She raised her teacup in a faint salute. After all, I'd hate to discover you actually have a mermaid's tail. Their laughter mingled softly in the restored warmth of the hall, now the night's eerie gambit already fading into memory. Ryan pointed at the small brass device set into the wall. This isn't just a peephole, it's a black magic detector. Looks like a glass gyroscope, right? If there's any suspicious magic or unwanted visitors nearby, it lights up and starts spinning. Kate said nothing. She stood there, eyes blazing with silent fury, like a cornered lioness. Ryan coughed nervously. Kate, you okay? You've gone totally quiet. Still no answer. Exasperated, Ryan waved his hand toward the long oak table before them. And this dining table, well, actually all the tables we use here, are connected to that peephole's enchantment. They don't need house elves to serve. Instead, they sense everyone's appetite and refill themselves accordingly. Kate's face softened just enough to show she was listening. Seizing the chance, Ryan leaned in. Shall I tell you more? After a moment's pause, Kate finally nodded once. Ryan's grin turned mischievous. All right, here's the kicker. Alchemical devices like these can only be disabled by one specific spell. Want to guess which? Silence stretched between them. Then Ryan burst out, Brain occlusion. He threw his head back in laughter, baring all 8 of his chipped front teeth in mock triumph. Kate's eyes narrowed. You find that hilarious, you. Before she could finish, she sprang up, clamped her fingers around Ryan's cheeks, and yanked him toward her. The storm had barely cleared when Ryan realized their latest crisis was finally behind them. No sooner had the dust settled than he slipped into his own head, and with a spark of telepathy and a razor-sharp strategic mind, he began constructing an entire RPG world on the fly. In Ryan's mental game, he took on the mantle of a priest whose holy duties focused on healing allies and weakening the undead. Beside him stood Kate, reborn as a legendary vampire hunter. Swift on her feet, deadly with blade in hand. Above them, thunder rumbled. Sheets of rain blurred the moonlight as their adventure sprang to life. Sir Kate strode out first, her twin blades gleaming in the darkness. In her left hand, a frosted sword crackled with icy power. In her right, a fiery blade aired the air. Draped in a shadow cloak that let her vanish into darkness at will, she looked every bit the ghostly avenger. Behind her, Priest Ryan grasped a gilded staff adorned with runes of purity. A soft glow pulsed outward from its tip, repelling raindrops and strands of grime, and forcing lesser demons to keep their distance. With a calm invocation, Ryan sent healing light dancing over Kate's armor and sapped the strength of the oncoming vampire horde. Together they plunged into the overgrown suburban cemetery. Tombstones jutted at odd angles, and gnarled branches cast wicked silhouettes across crumbling mausoleums. As the vampires lunged from shadowy alcoves, Ryan channeled blasts of sacred energy, while Kate melted back into the gloom, then struck with deadly precision. One by one, the creatures fell. With each vanquished fiend, their gear pulsed with newfound potency, still marked as level 1, but now trimmed with glittering gems that promised hidden boosts yet to be unlocked. Undeterred by the luring glow of loot drops, they pressed deeper, following Ryan's mental map toward the fabled kingdom of the dead. At the heart of that spectral domain, amid swirling mist and skeletal obelisks, they faced a final wave of horrors. But the synergy between priest and hunter proved unstoppable. A crescendo of holy light and crackling frost fire rent the darkness, and in an instant, the last vampire lord dissolved into ash. Ryan signaled the end of the game. The virtual realm winked out. The thunderstorm slipped away. But as Kate blinked at the real world, it was hard to believe that this fierce, pure combat, woven through with all the familiar trappings of loot and upgrade-driven progression, had captured her so completely. They exchanged a knowing smile. For tonight at least, victory tasted richer than any gem-encrusted treasure. Fortunately for Ryan, he'd mastered the art of synchronizing the flow of time in his mind with the real world, so playing virtual games never left him dazed, although it did drain his energy. When night fell, and it was finally time to rest, he gently but firmly brushed off Kate's pleas for just one more round. Relieved, he waited until she finished her bath and settled in for the night before slipping into the bathroom himself. He drew a hot bath, sank beneath the surface, and murmured the name, Thetis. Instantly, the familiar warmth of his tub dissolved into something far more magical. Around him, the water darkened into the pitch of the deep ocean, lit only by a soft, ethereal glow. Strange, beautiful creatures drifted past, oddly endearing in their alien shapes. Beneath the dim seabed light, swarms of plankton winked like distant stars. Here came the true wonders. Fish dyed a blood-red hue, their bodies winged like bats, others so translucent and slender they might have been kelp in motion, and predators with coppery eyes set above mouths stained a grim, bloody red. He even sensed Poseidon himself descending to reveal life forms invisible to ordinary folk, or to most wizards, for that matter. Nature is endlessly inventive, Ryan thought, his pulse quickening with awe. There will always be marvels we can scarcely imagine. Chapter 10: The Origin of the Merfolk. Deep beneath the ocean's surface, magic takes shape in countless forms, creatures born, directly or indirectly, from wizards' power or from spells gone horribly wrong. The most famous of these sea-dwellers are the merfolk. According to Ryan's research, they owe their existence to a wizard named Poseidon, who sought to conquer every corner of the seas. In his dominion, Poseidon cursed the human inhabitants of his realm. The nobility received what might have seemed a merciful fate, human torsos fused to fishtails, gleaming with iridescent scales. The commoners, however, endured a harsher metamorphosis. Their skin turned iron gray, their eyes glowed a haunting yellow, and their dark green hair grew long and tangled, an ugly, half-human horror. Poseidon used these low-born merfolk as slave labor, forcing them to build his underwater palaces and maintain his empire. When Poseidon finally fell, victim to his own ambition, his cursed subjects fled. They swam away from the warm waters preferred by the elegant mermaids and toward the colder seas. There, the bitterness of the waves and the scarcity of warmth reshaped their descendants. The beautiful merfolk of the tropics, like the sunlit Andrians, contrast sharply with the fierce Selkies of Scotland and the rugged Merrow of Ireland, whose features still echo the original curse. In the chaos that followed Poseidon's death, the freed merfolk slipped into savagery. Stripped of structure and starving, they survived by tearing flesh from prey and drinking blood straight from the wound. Yet even in this brutality, the spark of civilization endured. Over time, scattered bands of merfolk learned to cooperate again. They formed tribes and built villages, quarrying stone from underwater ridges to craft sturdy dwellings. Bit by bit, they reclaimed the art of society, stone by stone, breath by breath, remaking themselves in the abyssal world Poseidon once ruled. Mermaids have even begun to practice animal husbandry, domesticating creatures like the Grindylow, a sea monster with a horse's head and a fish's tail, and the fearsome lobo worms, which they've weaponized for defense. Beyond livestock, they craft fine jewelry and weapons, sculpt breathtaking underwater artworks, and hold conversations through graceful gestures. Until recently, wizards believed mermaids entirely nonverbal. Modern research has overturned that assumption. Mermaids speak a rich, melodic language of their own and compose hauntingly beautiful music. In the 19th century, the witch Mirabella Plunkett fell hopelessly in love with a mermaid dwelling in Loch Lomond. When her family forbade the match, Mirabella sorrowfully transformed herself into a haddock, never to be seen again. But I digress. The important takeaway is this: wizardry now reaches even the ocean's greatest depths. Having feasted his eyes on the breathtaking vista Kate could only glimpse from afar, Ryan intoned the spell again. In an instant, the world shimmered, and he found himself standing before a bathroom whose walls gleamed with green-hued metal and whose floor was carved with intricate patterns. He hovered, dry as ever, above a porcelain bathtub. With a whispered flick of magic, his clothes dissolved and reformed into soft pajamas. Ryan stepped forward and pushed open the door to the adjoining bedroom, ready for whatever awaited him next. Ryan leaned back against the headboard, taking in the view through the twin windows that framed the silent, rolling depths of the sea. Inside, the room glowed in warm tones, its wave-inspired decor punctuated by swaths of blue, white, and crimson. Even the mattress felt uncannily like a Muggle waterbed. Beside him, Kate had already peeled out of her clothes and slipped into a pair of oversized, furry pajamas. They were so large, they wrapped her small frame like a plush comforter. She'd been asleep for some time, her breathing slow and steady. Ryan cast a longing glance at the book on the nightstand, its title so unwieldy he could never recall it perfectly. Something like, "You don't know what you have, and how to use it once you discover it." But seeing Kate so peaceful, he let the idea of reading it go for tonight. He closed his eyes, and the lamps sensed the gesture, dimming gently until the room was bathed in darkness. Chapter 66, Spellcasting Overview. I still wasn't used to being beneath the sea. At breakfast, there was no music. On these horror trips, you'd expect a soundtrack, beautiful, otherworldly melodies of every style, the kind you never hear on any enchanted radio. Yet here, it was silent. By the time we finished eating, I realized we must have drifted into shallower water. It wasn't a product of some high-level vision charm. The proof was plain to see. The walls of the living room had turned into glass panels, transforming the entire space into a giant aquarium. Any Slytherin would find it oddly familiar. After all, our common room sits beside the Black Lake and looks much the same. What set this room apart was the transparent floor. Though the surrounding water still ran deep, sunlight now filtered in much more brightly than out in the open sea. Kate was positively ecstatic. Every so often she'd tap her wand, bringing a tiny paper figure to life as it hopped and danced across the glass floor. The simple joy on her face matched the gleaming panorama all around us. The homework parchment had been meticulously transfigured into the likeness of yesterday's vampire hunter from their thinking game. Around it, a handful of haphazard paper balls hovered, swooping in half-hearted arcs as if staging a mock attack. "Kate, if Professor McGonagall saw this, she'd award Ravenclaw 10 points. Ryan said, strolling over and tearing into a sandwich. "Granted, my transfiguration isn't exactly." Kate clicked her tongue, holstered her wand, and flicked the paper figure aside. Controlling a transfiguration with a second spell? That isn't transfiguration. It's just trickery. He rolled his eyes. You're in first year. You've barely scratched the surface of magic theory. You think you understand. Then explain why you can't simply cast a command spell on your own transfigured creatures, she challenged. Ryan groaned, rubbing his forehead. All right, do you remember Avis? She frowned. You used it when you were explaining spell classifications. It's a transfiguration spell. It summons a flock of birds. Exactly, he said, leaning against a nearby bench. I transfigure paper into birds, and they obey me perfectly. So why can't my paper vampire hunter and its little monsters take orders the same way? All right, Ryan said, leaning back in his chair. What about a pugno? You know, the volley of bullets spell. A pugno, Kate echoed, brow furrowing in confusion. You mean a volley of bullets? I thought a pugno just hurled small objects at a target. Not quite, Ryan replied. Think of charms as spells that force objects to undergo dramatic physical changes. And those objects don't have to be raw materials. They can already be enchanted. He paused, setting his milk glass on the table. Here's the trick. Pair a pugno, sometimes called million bullets, with flock of birds. First, cast flock of birds repeatedly and maintain the charm so you have a ring of golden birds orbiting you like a miniature solar system. The circular formation evens out your magical output with minimal strain. Kate leaned forward, intrigued. So you keep the birds circling around you, and then you unleash million bullets. Those birds, essentially plasticized by transfiguration, can't be altered by any subsequent alteration spells. They become perfect, high-velocity projectiles, far more effective than hurling knives or sharp tools. He took a thoughtful sip of milk. Imagine I toss a knife at you. A transfiguration expert could flick their wand and turn that knife into a harmless paper airplane mid-flight. No aiming required. That's the advantage here. Kate nodded slowly. I see how it works. But isn't that a lot to manage in the heat of battle? Ryan shrugged with a wry smile. Certainly advanced. But for those who master it, a pugno becomes a devastatingly precise volley of enchanted birds. No messy cleanup, and minimal effort once you've got the formation down. Kate paused, fingers brushing her chin as she considered the lesson. Remember, she began, transfiguration is all about subtlety. You can't just reshape something and immediately propel it at your target. You risk losing the form entirely. Sometimes the most powerful spells aren't the flashiest ones. She stepped back, watching her students' eyes follow her every movement. Take simple transfiguration tricks and combine them with other spells. You'd be surprised how effective they can be, on par with poison jinxes, dark curses, even the heaviest hexes. It's just a matter of planning. Gesturing toward the stone training courtyard, Kate recalled their last exercise. When we dealt with those animated corpses, I taught you the slide spell. Instead of forcing each zombie down with brute magical force, which burns through your reserves, you shifted the floor itself, making them lose their footing. The energy cost was far lower, and it let you focus your strength where it counted. She raised her wand, whispering a few words. A thick, rolling fog seeped from the tip, swirling between the trees. Environment is your ally. Hide yourself in mist, cloak your approach with low-hanging clouds. Even a basic weather charm, a rumbling thundercloud, a sudden gust, can disorient your opponent long enough for you to strike. Kate paused, recalling another trick. When you first faced those zombies, you cast the rooting shoes curse, making their shoes stick to the ground. You didn't attack the creatures' bodies directly, you targeted their footing. The same principle applies to wizards. Don't aim your most powerful jinxes at their robes or their wands. Hit their shoes, the ground under them, whatever they can't easily defend. She smiled, confident. Magic isn't just about raw power, it's about creativity. Controlling the battlefield, shaping the world around you, often wins you the fight before it even begins. With a final flick of her wrist, the fog dissipated as swiftly as it had appeared, leaving her student with both a clear view of the courtyard and a vital lesson in the art of magical combat. Ryan leaned forward, lowering his voice. First off, when you face a wizard who's effectively tongueless, no wand, no shoes, you'll have to pour extra power into your spells just to reach him. And if his willpower is stronger than yours, that is, he's more seasoned in practical magic, not necessarily theory, You might not even breach his defenses. He paused to let this sink in before continuing. Second, you need to chain your spells. Even a beginner with a bit of training won't stay rooted in place while you cast. They'll dodge, sidestep, or retaliate. So start with something subtle, say, a feet viscosity charm to gum up the ground under their boots, then immediately follow with a heavy hitter, like a knockout jinx. Kate, perched beside him on the deck rail, had her quill poised over a dog-eared notebook. True to her Ravenclaw instincts, she was determined to capture every word. "Memory's great," she murmured under her breath, "but a pen's even better." Below them, the research vessel Poseidon crept through the twilight waters, its black-hulled prow cutting a deliberate course. The dwarf wizard at the helm, his grizzled beard dancing in the breeze, called out that they'd reach their target by nightfall. With hours to kill, Ryan and Kate let their eyes drift across the dusky sea, enjoying the charged stillness. Then a hulking shape broke the horizon, a vast rectangular edifice rising from the depths. It was unmistakably the submerged platform off Bimini Island, first charted by Muggle oceanographers in 1967. The ancient stones, slick with algae, glinted faintly in the dying light, a silent promise of secrets waiting to be unearthed. Kate was the first to spot it. She lay back on the sofa, peering curiously at the unfolding scene, her eyes widening as she took in the vast submerged metropolis. A colossal stone wall, stretching at least 2 kilometers, ran along the city's edge. Just beyond it lay a broad avenue paved with carefully arranged rectangular and polygonal stones, some laid out in intricate patterns. Here and there, flat-topped, pyramids rose from the sand like silent sentinels, lending an unmistakable Egyptian air to the ruins. This sunken city, the work of Poseidon himself, must have been magnificent in its heyday. Docks and harbor fittings jutted from the seabed, once bustling with merchant vessels. In the very heart of the city stood marble statues, their weather-worn faces still radiating a deep religious reverence. All around, half-buried pyramids and crumbling temples hinted at the lost grandeur of a civilization absorbed by the sea. A civilization whose wizards had clearly held pyramids in high esteem. At last, Kate reached for her camera, an invention of the Muggle world that had long since found its way into the magical community. She had never used it before, but now she clicked it to life, snapping picture after picture. Unlike mundane snapshots that required time-consuming developing potions, this camera produced instant images, capturing every detail of the submerged marvel in crisp, living color. Kate's excitement grew with each frame. These were discoveries worthy of a lifetime, and she was determined to record them all. Some resourceful, but impoverished wizards still rely on discarded Muggle cameras. They salvage them from junkyards, painstakingly restore their lenses and shutters with tinkering potions, then use Muggle-style film development to capture images of the magical world. Along their journey, Ryan and Kate discovered that not all pyramids in these waters are abandoned relics. Hidden from non-magical eyes, they came upon a series of crystalline pyramids, constructed entirely of glass or a glass-like substance, each surface so flawlessly smooth it caught every glimmer of sunlight. Inside one of these shimmering structures, on a polished obsidian table, lay a weathered manual. It revealed that this very pyramid served as the secret residence of the local wizarding community, an underwater sanctuary so romantic and secluded it felt more like a fairy tale. With an enclave this large, nestled beneath the waves, it's no wonder that the famed navigator Christopher Columbus vanished when he approached the Bermuda Triangle. His compasses spun wildly, and his instruments failed, a phenomenon not unlike the way electricity falters at Hogwarts. As Ryan and Kate read the final lines of the manual, they realize the truth. The magical world extends far beyond the 7 books chronicling Harry Potter's adventures. They had only scratched the surface of a realm filled with marvels waiting to be uncovered. Sunlight filtered deeper and deeper into the sea, and schools of fish grew ever more abundant around them. All afternoon, Kate had refrained from reciting the spell that summoned her invisible Poseidon barrier. Tiny plankton drifted by like motes of dust caught in a sunbeam. On this tranquil afternoon, she abandoned her usual mind games with Ryan. Instead, she turned her full attention to the camera in her hands, snapping shot after shot. Selfies, wide-angle views of the underwater world, and most of all, candid portraits of him. For a fleeting moment, Ryan forgot he'd ever time-traveled. He felt like any other teenager, reluctantly posing for pictures at a friend's insistence. The little volume of selected spells of the 18th century lay forgotten in the sand, its pages untouched. But as Kate adjusted her angles, their destination appeared before them. Though it was already 6 o'clock in the evening, warm sunlight still suffused the seabed. Ahead rose a colossal pyramid with a flat summit, its walls fashioned from a translucent, glass-like material that refracted the amber light all around. The Poseidon's engines hummed as it drifted to a halt above the pyramid's peak. Slowly, the ship descended, its inflatable skirt deflating with a soft hiss until it settled lightly on the ancient stones. Stripped of Thetis's enchantment, the vessel reverted to its original, unadorned form. Inside the main chamber, a corridor of translucent crystal suddenly took shape in the floor. Its surface was flawlessly smooth, and peering down revealed nothing but an abyss of empty air. Without a second thought, Kate shoved her few belongings into Ryan's pockets and leapt into the corridor, her clear laughter ringing through the hold. Though Ryan remained aboard for a heartbeat longer, he could still hear her joy echoing below. Compelled by curiosity, he followed her. The corridor held firmly underfoot, and through its glassy walls he beheld a breathtaking panorama, an entire city divided into twin realms. An invisible barrier bisected the settlement. On one side, a vibrant seabed teeming with aquatic life. On the other, a lush land kingdom. The two halves mirrored each other, weaving together in harmonious splendor. Above, wizards draped themselves in robes of kelp, jellyfish tendrils, and living coral. Some spread carpets of woven seaweed across the sand. Others glided overhead in floating chariots, fashioned from manta ray wings and polished shells. Below, mermaids danced through the currents, waving to their airborne counterparts. Air and water met in a silent ballet, a testament to the unity of this enchanted realm. At the ocean floor, the tunnel emerges into a grand viewing gallery, and already the visitors are hard to miss. Wizards and merfolk glide past in fishbowl-style helmets. A few rely solely on the bubblehead spell to breathe, while others have enlisted transformation magic to sprout gills along their temples. They swim in anxious half-circles, murmuring spells to keep their headgear in place. Ryan tugs at his mask, scowling at the sluggish pace. The tunnel's inner walls gleam smooth and polished, but an unseen current tugs gently against each step, surely a precaution to give tourists time to admire the sights. Ryan, by contrast, could have sprinted the whole descent on dry land without breaking a sweat. After what feels like an eternity at turtle speed, the ground abruptly vanishes beneath their feet with a soft whoosh of rushing water. Kate lets out a delighted laugh as they slide forward into a vast domed chamber filled with an astonishingly clear liquid. It feels exactly like seawater swirled around them, yet their clothes and hair remain bone dry. It looks like water, feels like water, even smells like it, Ryan murmurs half to himself as he brushes an imaginary droplet from his sleeve. But you can't drink it and you never get wet. Kate giggles and tugs on his sleeve. And check out their fashion sense. She nods toward a nearby wizard whose wide-brimmed hat has been artfully replaced with a glossy lobster, shell, spines and all. Around him, other spellcasters sport hats made from clam shells, seahorse skeletons, even the curved jawbones of ancient leviathans. Ryan shakes his head in amusement. Seafood couture, he says. Only down here would you see a rock lobster used as a top hat. They step deeper into the chamber, the light refracting through the water-like medium above them, casting dancing patterns on the ornate coral pillars. As Kate bounces on the balls of her feet, eyes wide, Ryan lets out a long breath, and for the first time senses the thrill of discovery beneath the waves. The reception hall buzzed with hushed chatter as students filed in to register for the new semester. Ryan, tall and dark-haired, leaned in toward his friend Kate and sent the thought purely into her mind. Kate, here's a tip. That's Uric, Ravenclaw's famous oddball. Kate followed his gaze to a silver-haired wizard just a few paces away, wearing what appeared to be a live jellyfish as a hat. Around them, whispers broke out, students praising Ryan's polite nod and handsome features as he stood patiently in line. Kate sighed. I guess normal is a relative term here, she murmured aloud. While they waited at the reception desk, Ryan couldn't resist more mental commentary. He really takes weirdo to a new level, he complained, eyebrows arched. Not so fast, Kate replied firmly in his mind. She gave him a teasing look. You've barely cracked a magical history book. If you want context, read the biography of Ulrich the Weird by Rodolfo Pittiman. Ulrich's eccentricities make a lot more sense once you know his story. Ryan rolled his eyes, but fell quiet. Kate smiled to herself, and to the jellyfish-hatted Ulrich, confident that behind the unusual attire lay one of Ravenclaw's most brilliant minds. The so-called divination bird I mentioned before was really nothing more than a minor footnote. Everyone knows a hellbird's shrill, piercing call can drive listeners mad. But the eccentric wizard Ulrich was convinced that the cry actually has healing properties. To prove his point to the Magic Council, he spent 3 solid months listening to that ear-splitting shriek around the clock, wearing a dead badger as a makeshift wig for good measure. If he can endure that, his magical resilience must be far greater than anyone suspected. I glanced at Ryan. What danger rating does a hellbird carry? He tapped his chin. Where does it fall in the Council's classifications? Level 3, I answered, well within the ability of any competent wizard. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Got it. I couldn't resist speaking out loud. By law, every hellbird must be silenced with a monthly silencing spell before it can be sold. Prospective owners have to demonstrate their silencing proficiency to earn a license. I let the words hang in the air. Remember, it's only the bird's voice that makes it dangerous, and that risk is entirely avoidable. Yet Ulrich deliberately subjected himself to those bone-chilling screams for 3 months straight. Back then, there was simply no way to fake your qualifications when you applied for experiments with the Magic Council. He literally subdued his body with sheer willpower, Ryan said, shaking his head. Insane wizards, especially half-mad ones like Ulrich, are terrifying. Even if he somehow comes out of that 3-month ordeal in perfect health, it'll be unbelievable. If he keeps pushing himself this way, I'll bet. He cut himself off. Bet what? Kate asked, her round face and cat-like eyes making her look impossibly cute. Nothing. I was overthinking. He'll probably snap. Ryan forced a smile, though in his mind, he finished the sentence. I'm willing to wager he stays healthy forever. No wonder Ulrich's death date is such a mystery. After about 10 more minutes, a nondescript wizard hurried over, sweat pouring off his glasses in rivulets. His plain garb clashed with the seafood-themed decor of the room, making him look oddly out of place. Mr. Ryan, Miss Kate, the wizard panted, bowing low. We're ready for you now. Kate, I have been waiting for you. Please, follow me. The unassuming wizard offered a polite apology and gave them a brief orientation on where they'd be staying for the night. Then he led Ryan and Kate about 100 meters from the pool to a spacious reception hall. Inside, they completed a quick registration. When they were done, he handed each of them a small, pocket watch-style device. This will always point back to reception, he explained. With it, you're free to explore at your leisure. The reception hall itself was impressive. Along one wall stood a massive aquarium teeming with exotic fish, their colors shimmering under the lights. Near the entrance was a rental desk lined with sleek, hovering airships ready for local excursions. A grand staircase at the far end led up to the dining room and private bedrooms on the second floor. Ryan turned to Kate as they climbed the steps. So, dinner here in the reception hall, or shall we head out and see what the town has to offer? Kate paused to glance at the aquarium's gentle glow. Let's eat here first, she decided. It'll give us a chance to settle in and see what makes this place unique. Chapter 68, The Mysterious Contract. What's the first thing you do when you arrive in a strange city? Reconnoiter the streets? Stay on high alert? Not Ryan. From the moment he stepped aboard the Poseidon, he sensed that something wasn't right, like invisible chains binding him in place. Those chains turned out to be the contract he'd signed back when he first browsed the menu and service options. At the time, it had seemed innocuous. A simple agreement designed to accustom visiting wizards to life beneath the waves and ensure they never revealed the city's secrets once they left. The fees were dirt cheap, and the protections promised were comprehensive. It all sounded fair, too fair. And yet Ryan, flush with pride after mastering the level 6 death curse, hadn't hesitated. He'd felt unstoppable, convinced that no corner of the world was off-limits. It wasn't until he was well inside Poseidon's glass domes and winding coral avenues that he realized the truth. This contract didn't just regulate behavior, it erased memories. Any knowledge gained here would vanish the moment he passed beyond the city's borders. And though the terms looked benign on paper, Ryan's intuition, always his sharpest tool, had whispered a warning from the start. Now, with the ink dry and the enchantment sealed, that warning echoed relentlessly in his mind. He was bound, and there was no obvious loophole. But Ryan Harding didn't give up easily. Somewhere in these neon-lit spires and sunken plazas lay a way to break, or at least bend, the contract's terms, and he intended to find it. Ryan stared in disbelief as he landed within the underwater city. Neither he, now in his phoenix form, nor the house elves at his side could apparate back to the surface. At first, he assumed some powerful anti-apparition enchantment was at work. After all, house elves are often warded against, but a phoenix's magic should bypass such constraints. Yet no wards were detected. Instead, the barrier was simply the ocean's depth. The city lay so far below the waves that any direct teleport to the surface misfired. A phoenix trying it would be deposited on the seabed, crushed by the pressure, then drift upward to revive on the water's surface. What looked like a magical blockade was really an ingenious natural failsafe. No spells to break, only the crushing depths to deter intruders and keep residents from wandering off. Ryan guessed that every creature here had, knowingly or not, entered an implicit contract to remain inside this submerged realm. But that contract had no power over him. His phoenix heritage nullified it the moment it would have bound him, a fact he had never noticed until now. With that revelation, he understood exactly why the city's population was so insular, and why no one had ever simply apparated away. Armed with this knowledge and no magical chains to hold him, Ryan folded his wings and prepared to explore his new surroundings. Despite the reputation of these departing wizards as soul stealers, no one behind this daunting expedition seemed deterred. In fact, they welcomed it. Ryan had unearthed the astonishing truth. The contract's vessel was none other than the collective memory of the underwater city itself. Only when a wizard set foot within its bounds, or consciously recognized the city as their destination, did the oath spring to life. Worse still, after one caster probed another's soul and glimpsed a relevant memory, that caster too became bound by the same inescapable vow. They could not speak of what they had seen, no matter how hard they tried. It was a brilliantly twisted enchantment, memory-driven and impervious, surely the closest thing to a Fidelius charm ever devised for an entire community. Then came Ryan's most unsettling revelation. He sensed the lingering threads of the very contract he had somehow broken free from. This binding was more than a simple vow of secrecy. It had become a voluntary law embraced by nearly every wizard in the submerged city. Over time, it had so thoroughly silenced their worst instincts that they were almost incapable of then harming one another. The bond wove through them like a spider's web, entangling each wizard in its gossamer threads. Strangest of all, the contract appeared to have no discernible origin. It was born of a shared dream, a collective vision of utopia that had taken root in every mind. Ryan found himself drained by the scope of the enchantment. Even the sumptuous seafood spread in the waiting room failed to rouse his appetite. He leaned toward Kate, voice low. "Kate, I need to step out for a moment. Be careful not to touch my body. One wrong move and the spell will shatter." Ryan's voice rang sharply in Kate's mind as she feasted at the long oak table in Smith Castle's great hall. Beside her, he appeared to lounge on a plush divan, but in truth he watched the room through the blazing form of a phoenix, its keen gaze picking out magical sigils invisible to ordinary wizards. All around, the ancient walls stirred, greeting their master's return. But there was no time to tarry. Moments after leaving the underwater city's sanctum, Ryan rejoined Jack in Diagon Alley, just as they had arranged through the Lord God's messenger. Jack, now disguised beneath the enchanted sorting hat as George Smith, felt Ryan's spirit perched like a silent advisor at the nape of his neck. Together, they made their way straight to number 59, a modest-looking travel agency crafted by the same architect behind Ollivander's wand shop. Though it was well past 7 in the evening, lanterns glowed cheerily in the windows, and the door stood invitingly ajar. Jack pushed it open. Inside, the familiar clerk lounged atop a towering stool behind a marble counter. He tapped his wand absently against the stone, and, as if choreographed, one ripe pear sprouted two tiny legs and launched into an energetic tap dance across the desk. The whimsy of the scene only underscored the deeper truth. In Diagon Alley, adventure lingered behind every enchantment, and peril was never far behind. Jack slipped into the reception hall, late enough that the warm greetings of earlier in the day had vanished. The receptionist, brusque and expressionless, offered neither hello nor introduction. With a simple flick of his wand, the stack of parchment on the counter sprouted feathered wings, fluttered into Jack's waiting hand, and then collapsed back into its flat, printed form. The man behind the desk looked as if he resented every second he had to spend serving a customer. Behind Jack, Ryan hovered, just out of sight. His reconnaissance implant granted him a flawless 365-degree phoenix's eye view, no need for Quirrell-style slates or dark curses. He studied the parchment in Jack's hand. It was the same menu they'd seen before, except that the cost of a private tour had skyrocketed to 1,000 galleons, 10 times the price they'd paid last time. Ryan scanned the document for hidden contracts, binding runes, or invisible seals. All he found was ordinary parchment. The only enchantment was a tiny, iridescent sprite dancing along the bottom of the page, beckoning clients to sign here. Step right up, seal the deal. There was no fine print, just an inflated price tag and a touch of showmanship. Their only real variables were the late hour and the presence of other adult wizards in the lobby. Ryan paused, ran the numbers in his head, then projected a calm whisper into Jack's mind. Relax, Jack. From the receptionist's point of view, the well-dressed middle-aged man had locked eyes with him for a single, unsettling moment. And just like that, the receptionist felt his mind go blank. He rubbed the back of his neck, convinced it was just a fleeting daydream. Nothing unusual had really happened. Meanwhile, Jack, perfectly calm, pretended not to notice and slipped away. But Ryan, lingering behind the desk, was white-knuckled with shock. "How is this even possible?" he gasped. "There's more going on here than we thought," Jack replied quietly. "That menu we hand out? It's not harmless literature. It has a hidden contract woven into its fine print, an enchantment designed to bind any young ard who takes it. They offer it at a steep discount, but its real purpose is to recruit fresh recruits into our world." He paced the lobby, eyes darting as though expecting eavesdroppers. Look at the state of Muggle society today. British wizards have barely adapted, but overseas, many wizarding communities are taking drastic steps to stifle Muggle advancement. Delindover's scheme is simply the boldest example we've seen. All over the globe, secret enclaves are springing up in places Muggles can't reach, shielding our magic from exposure and swelling our ranks. Ryan swallowed hard. "And we're too. Absorb new blood," Jack finished, his voice low and determined. "Exactly." Despite the ever-growing power and sophistication of the confusion charm, many witches and wizards still harbor deep unease around Muggles, especially after witnessing the horrors of the First World War. Though a mundane firearm carries no magic and can be rendered harmless by the right spell, the sheer destructive force of modern missiles, and even nuclear warheads, far outstrips the protective power of any single wizard. It was this dread that drove a clandestine group of wizards to create the fabled underwater city. Hidden beneath the waves, they uncovered the lost legacy of Poseidon, god of the sea, and vowed to keep it secret. To recruit fresh blood and secure their refuge's future, they founded an international travel agency, Horror Tour. Beginning at age 11, young witches and wizards are invited to journey to the submerged metropolis, witness its marvels firsthand, and decide whether its vision of magic is worth embracing. Every traveler signs a strict magical contract. They may never reveal the city's location, nor attempt to undermine the Horror Tour in any way. Even if a visitor somehow glimpses the city's true nature, the contract itself binds them to silence. Thus, each new arrival becomes both guest and guardian of the deepest secret in the wizarding world. For countless generations, hidden cities of wizards have sprung to life on the ocean floor beneath the Bermuda Triangle. Chapter 69, Utopia. Ryan's eyes fluttered open to a soft, crimson glow. He lay in the heart of an undersea city, hidden within the Bermuda Triangle, an enclave so well warded that ordinary witches and wizards couldn't even sense its presence. Only those who'd signed a binding contract with Poseidon and followed his guidance could ever hope to find this place. As the city's gentle luminescence settled around him, Ryan felt a long-lost thrill of discovery stirring in his chest. Spires of pearlescent shells spiraled upward, and transparent domes revealed sweeping gardens of waving kelp and schools of jewel-bright fish. Everywhere he looked, the architecture blended ancient grandeur with aquatic grace, as though the sea itself had grown into a palace. He found himself recalling a passage Hermione once quoted from an old Durmstrang student's letter, Victor Krum, in fact, where he compared his own school to Hogwarts. "Our castle," Victor had said, "is only 4 stories tall, and we must light its hearths by magic alone, but our grounds stretch farther than these." He had leaned forward, eyes alight with pride. "In winter, the days are short, so we can't spend much time outside, but in summer, we flew our broomsticks above frozen lakes and over pine-clad mountains every day." Victor's story had ended abruptly when Headmaster Karkaroff cleared his throat and ordered silence. Now, standing beneath Poseidon's vaulted ocean halls, Ryan realized this hidden city was in many ways a far grander utopia than any he'd ever imagined. A gentle tide of currents drifted through the corridors like a silent invitation. Ryan rose to his feet, determined to explore every shell-carved archway and glowing corridor. Little did he know that beyond these walls lay discoveries that would change not only his life, but the fate of the magical world itself. All right, Victor. No more spoilers, or our charming friend will figure out exactly where we are." Victor only grinned and carried on. After Voldemort's resurrection, Karkaroff abandoned that so-called hidden Durmstrang. He fled on his own and ended up dying in a little wooden hut, barely a year into his exile. Imagine if he'd ever taken one of those terror tours back in his youth. Even the Dark Lord might have given up trying to find him after that. "Kate, you can come out now," Ryan said, lifting his head as he spoke. Kate started, then crept from her hiding place. "When did you get back?" she whispered, wide-eyed. Ryan's lips curved in a sly smile. "I'm dying to see how the wizards behind the horrible journey will present this city, and what grand vision they have in mind." Her curiosity won. Kate grabbed Ryan's sleeve and led him toward the alcove she'd noticed earlier in the corridor. They passed several robed figures along the way. Each glanced at their unusual foreign attire, but offered nothing more than a polite nod. Though everyone recognized they weren't locals, no one gave them more than a cool, indifferent greeting. Kate stole a nervous glance at Ryan, her heart pounding with anticipation at what lay just beyond that door. The ground here wasn't paved with tiles or cobblestones, but left in its natural, almost primordial state, eerily reminiscent of the trail through the zombie marsh. It looked ordinary enough, yet no mud clung to our boots. Overhead hovered a vast, artificial sun. From Ryan's professional perspective, it wasn't powered by enchantments, but by a sprawling solar array. Sunlight filtered through the sea's surface and beamed here to bathe the city in a warm, rippling glow. All around us, shops displayed marvels of underwater living. Aquariums filled with vivid red corals stood beside those housing shark fins, clipped into sleek helmets that, when worn, let you breathe freely beneath the waves. Clothing boutiques lined the streets too, though traditional wizarding robes were rare. Most garments were crafted from the hides and scales of marine creatures, each piece imbued with magic to withstand pressure and temperature while retaining an elegant, otherworldly sheen. Kate, ever the curious deer, darted from stall to stall, quizzing merchants about prices and local lore. Through her questions, the city's true purpose emerged. It was founded by wizarding families long thought extinct, a living ark preserving their bloodlines and magical heritage. Yet here, pure-blood status held no special prestige. What mattered was talent, dedication, and a shared commitment to breathing new life into these resurrected lineages. In this wizarding world, as long as you possess magic, you're entitled to a lifetime of study. You never need to hold a job. All you do is choose a research topic and publish papers once in a while. The less magically gifted, squibs and half-bloods born to Muggle families staff the service sector, doing the simple tasks deliberately reserved for non-magical folk. When Kate heard there was a new journal article in circulation, she couldn't wait to get her hands on it. To her surprise, even though these papers are officially forbidden to leave the academy grounds, almost every student carries a copy, much like people swapping issues of the Daily Prophet. Strike up a conversation with any passing muggle, and they'll readily chat about basic magical theory. Under Ryan's scrutiny, it turned out that most of the campus wizards have reached at least level 4 in charms. They're not like the elite Hogwarts graduates who rely on a handful of high-level spells. Instead, they wield the everyday charms that precisely match their training. Ryan, come look at this. Kate tugged him toward a nearby bench and flipped open the journal a fellow student had lent her. The pages were so immaculate, they might have been printed just moments ago. Unlike the Daily Prophet, this new journal devotes only a single page to gossip, flying car races, and sea beast driving competitions. Every other article dives straight into magic, refining the Confundus charm, cultivating crops on the ocean floor, taming and housing sea creatures, and developing stronger protective enchantments. Reading it left me speechless, as if I were the clown at the circus. Here are wizards who've already built the very society I've been dreaming of. Clearly, there's never just one genius in the world, and witches and wizards are by no means indifferent to Muggle progress. Yet I can't fathom how any Ravenclaw-minded wizard could trade a thirst for knowledge for a sack of golden galleons. Perhaps that's why so many Lockharts wander our ranks, ambitious spellcasters quietly networking to carve out their own little paradises. The Dark Lord and the so-called White Wizard? Mere wisps of rumor. Confronted with powerful purebloods, whether they proclaim magic supreme or insist love reigns above all, an entire faction of wizards finally shrugged, stepped off the grand chessboard, and founded their own communities and homelands. Ryan leaned forward across the reception desk of the horror tour office, eyes bright with curiosity. The gaunt receptionist, arms folded, lowered his voice. You think the wizards only hide in Hogwarts or at the bottom of the Bermuda Triangle? Believe it or not, there's an enclave up on the moon, completely off the radar. Ryan's heart skipped. Could that alien rumored to patrol Armstrong Moon Landing Port really be a wizard in disguise? He opened his mouth to ask more, but the man merely smirked. That's enough spoilers for one night. Turn the page when you dare. Back in his cramped apartment, Ryan pawed through the dog-eared journal of Albus Dumbledore, freshly borrowed from the library. But after 20 minutes of polite anecdotes about school pranks and dueling clubs, he sighed. Dumbledore struck him as mediocre. He'd neither overturned the wizarding establishment nor proposed any grand ideals, just another respected headmaster who'd played it safe. Kate, meanwhile, had slipped out to question a few passers-by. When she returned, she handed him a glossy flyer from City Central Library. Good news for research, she said. Wizards can actually check out books here. Muggles and squibs are restricted to reading inside the building, but the doors are open. Ryan scanned the leaflet. Sounds promising. Only catch? Kate tilted her head. A bald security guard told me their magical collection is pretty antiquated. He laughed about a spell that forces a werewolf to revert to human form, only for a few minutes when the moon is fullest. Ryan folded the flyer and tucked it into his jacket pocket. Old magic or not, it's a lead, and any knowledge we can get our hands on counts. He stared out the window at the black sky, peppered with pinpricks of starlight. If wizards could hide beneath ocean trenches and on the moon's desolate plains, what else was out there? On Mars, Jupiter, planets beyond his wildest dreams. He shook off the thought. Tonight's adventure had only just begun. Between the Dragon Care wards, the enchantment maintenance workshops, and the animagus enhancement chambers, Kate had completely forgotten about the fish tank exhibit. She dashed off to the far side of the city, the sunken district, so eagerly that if Ryan hadn't caught her sleeve, she'd surely have stayed wandering there until bedtime. By the time he finally pulled her away, dusk had fallen. The sun above them had slipped into a slender crescent, bathing the streets in pale moonlight. Yet no guide or attendant came forward to explain the sights or offer directions. That's when Ryan realized this city needed no formal introduction. Every fountain, spire, and soaring airship they passed spoke for itself. At first, Ryan looked for flaws. He worried about how those who couldn't wield magic might be treated. He'd heard tales of marginalization in other realms. But here, their city's kindness toward non-magical folk reminded him of how compassionate societies once cared for the disabled in his old life. Because magic handled so many tasks, everyday roles had been specially reserved for people without it, positions of honor, visibility, and purpose. Of course, no place is without a shadow, but an unbreakable pact bound everyone here. No one may harm another. That simple rule, stronger than any statute, kept the darkness at bay. And as Ryan followed Kate's bright laugh into the midnight streets, he understood that magic was only part of the wonder. The true enchantment lay in the city's heart. Every contest had been transformed into a friendly, healthy rivalry. Article writing challenges, aircraft and sea beast piloting races, and singing competitions. Chapter 70, Atlantis. Ryan led Kate across the smooth, packed earth floor, tugging gently at her sleeve. She hesitated, flipping through one of the battered magical journals she'd collected since they arrived, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Come on," he urged, glancing back over his shoulder. Ahead lay the reception hall, a grand chamber carved from white stone, its walls veined with luminescent coral and etched with forgotten runes. Unlike Kate, who devoured every arcane text she could find, Ryan avoided magical treatises. To him, they offered only partial truths, snippets of knowledge filtered through someone else's experience. He preferred to think things through for himself, drawing inspiration from what he saw and felt. Admittedly, his unusual DNA made reading even mundane history a strain on his mind, but his curiosity drove him on. He wanted the whole picture, not just fragments. As they approached the towering double doors, Ryan recited the story he'd pieced together. This place was originally called Atlantis, the legendary domain of Poseidon. It vanished beneath the waves for centuries until a group of wizards, part of what they now call the Horror Journey Expedition, stumbled across it. Instead of looting the ruins, they formed an alliance with the merfolk who lived here. Together, they spent the last 200 years restoring Atlantis to its former glory. Kate finally snapped the journal shut and fell into step beside him. Which schools were involved? Most of the wizards came from Ilvermorny in the States, Ryan answered, with many more from Hogwarts in the UK and a handful from Beauxbatons in France, not to mention various academies around the globe. They all contributed their magic and knowledge, and now their legacy is the city we're about to explore. With a shared glance, they pushed open the doors. Soft, sapphire light spilled out, revealing a grand foyer where coral-studded columns soared overhead and bioluminescent jellyfish drifted lazily through the air. In that moment, Atlantis felt less like a myth and more like the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. Interestingly, at Ilvermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry in America, the horned serpents far outnumber any other house. Valued for their intellectual curiosity and scholarly bent, horned serpents embody the pursuit of wisdom. By contrast, at Hogwarts, the majority of students in our circle come from Ravenclaw, who prize knowledge above all, followed by Hufflepuff. Gryffindors and Slytherins are almost never seen. That imbalance isn't surprising when you consider the ideals at play. Gryffindors, ever bold and impulsive, might see the act of retreating to create a secluded haven as cowardly. Ravenclaws, meanwhile, love to question, what is the world, whereas our founders insisted on exploring what should the world become. And ambitious Slytherins, their hunger for power sits ill with our ethos. So these like-minded scholars took to calling themselves the Sages. They forged a solemn pact to guard one another against excess, share arcane discoveries freely, and advance together in forbidden lore. Through their unified efforts, the lost city of Atlantis was reborn. They modeled their new institution on Hogwarts' four-house system, but with entirely new names and symbols. It is neither named after a founding dean, as is Hogwarts, nor defined by four mythical creatures like Ilvermorny. Here, in the rediscovered halls of Atlantis, a fresh legacy begins. They named it the College of the Four Virtues: wisdom, courage, honesty, and enterprise, and built it atop the city where they were born so only local wizards could enroll. Yet they opened its doors to muggles and squibs as fee-paying students. To honor the mermaids who helped reclaim this land, half the city was sculpted into lagoons, canals, and shimmering reefs. The other half remained a bustling metropolis of cobblestone streets and enchanted spires. That afternoon, as the sunset painted the coral domes in rose and gold, Kate turned to Ryan. "Let's visit the library tomorrow, Ro." Ryan offered a wry smile. "All right, but remember, no removing books. Only wizards born here may borrow volumes. Foreign students can read them on site, nothing more." Kate nodded, her eyes bright with anticipation. The library's vast reading halls were her favorite refuge. Time, as it always does, slipped by far too quickly. Before they knew it, evening had fallen on their final day. Oddly, no one appeared to bid them farewell. No guides, no porters, no kindly professors at the gate. It was as if their stay had been indistinguishable from a simple holiday, not a privilege extended by contract. Kate felt no unease. Her fascination with the college's treasures overrode any suspicion about the restrictive borrowing policy. At 6 o'clock, they found themselves in a lavish chamber beneath the waves. Atlantean glass walls curved overhead, schools of luminescent fish drifting by. A magic circle glimmered at the center. Hand in hand, they stepped onto it. In the blink of an eye, the water fell away, and they stood, dazed but unharmed, on a rain-slick brick street. They had arrived at 59 Diagon Alley. Even Ryan, who'd traveled the world of wizardry, couldn't help but admit this was something new and astonishingly advanced. Kate's voice cut through Ryan's thoughts before he even had a chance to exhale. "Ryan, did we really just dive to the bottom of the ocean? There were entire cities down there, and wizards." He forced a calm smile. "The International Federation of Wizards has never acknowledged a nation like that, and they certainly never mentioned an underwater school." "It's unbelievable," Kate murmured, brow furrowed. "Why didn't I feel anything strange before?" Ryan's fingers twitched as he fought to keep his expression neutral. What Kate didn't know was that her surprise, and every word she'd just spoken, had been subtly guided by the parasitic bond he shared with her. The moment she'd tried to express her astonishment, the magical contract had activated, opening a silent channel between their minds. Ryan had anticipated this risk. He'd forged a psychic shield around himself just in time, allowing him to tap into Kate's thoughts without letting the contract latch onto him. A faint red glow had pulsed along his skin the instant the bond tried to spread. In response, the contract had recoiled, detaching itself from Ryan and lying dormant within Kate's subconscious. As long as she didn't return to Atlantis, the magic would feed her with positive energies, helping her grow stronger and more perceptive. He glanced at her, softening his tone. "Don't worry, I'll keep this place to myself. No one else needs to know it exists. At least, not yet." Kate's eyes shone with excitement and a trace of relief. "Promise me we'll go back someday." "Someday," Ryan replied, though in his mind he already worried about what else Atlantis might be hiding and how far the contract's influence could truly reach. This hidden realm must remain cut off from the rest of the world. When Ryan first learned of the ancient contract that binds all wizards, he even dreamed up a spell to turn his own memories into a kind of magical bullet, one he could fire straight into another person's mind. Since the contract has no true owner and cannot be altered, anyone struck by that memory round would instantly be bound by its terms. Wizards would lose the ability to harm each other, and a new age of peace, perhaps even utopia, would dawn. But during his reconnaissance in the city, Ryan uncovered a startling truth. The contract itself isn't the source of that peacekeeping power. Instead, its magic springs from the collective will of the Atlantean wizards, who have cherished 2 centuries of harmony beneath the waves. Once a wizard leaves Atlantis, the contract still forbids violence, but it also erases the very word Atlantis from their speech and writing. It's as if the contract's enchantment shields the underwater kingdom from discovery. The moment you stop believing it exists, you simply can't target it with mind or magic. Eve, if Ryan devoted all eternity to reshaping Earth's climate, flora, and fauna to mirror Atlantis, that by itself would never guarantee true peace, because real peace, he learned, must come from within. At the heart of Atlantis lies a single, unifying purpose. Its founders, all-powerful wizards, were bound by the same radiant vision. From the moment the underwater city contract was forged, they dreamed of a sanctum where magic could flourish without fear or strife. In Atlantis' sealed halls, a new generation of little wizards is born. innocent, curious, and utterly incapable of harming another. In many ways, they resemble house elves, yet they never lose their sense of self. Their kindness is not the product of subjugation, but of the contract's enchantment, which gently shapes their nature from infancy. When the city's elders recruit additional wizards, they invariably seek the youngest candidates. At that age, beliefs and loyalties are still malleable, perfectly suited for the contract's subtle guidance. Any wizard who grows up in Atlantis, wizardling or recruit, will sooner or later adopt its inviolate rule: magic is a gift to be shared, never used to wound. Yet this ideal faces a grim obstacle. If Atlantis is to become the example for the wider world, if every wizard everywhere is to lay down their wand against a fellow practitioner, then the founders must confront those who resist their vision. Wizards who reject the contract's tenets would have to be coerced, silenced, or even eliminated. Only then could Atlantic law claim true universality. And so, for now, Atlantis remains a secret realm, its wonders known only to those bound by its magic. To extend its model beyond these deep blue walls would demand a harsh reckoning, one the city's architects have not yet the will, or perhaps the heart, to wage. Kate stiffened. "Ryan, didn't you notice? We can't reveal anything about Atlantis. No words, no ink, no paper." A cool voice sounded in her mind. "That's the whole point of the contract, to enjoy unimaginable travel at a bargain price in exchange for absolute secrecy." Kate lowered her gaze and sighed. "All right, I won't say a word." When she looked up again, she found herself back in the UK, standing in Diagon Alley, right inside the Horror Tour travel agency. To her surprise, no one had shown up to collect the remaining fee. At the start, the total had been set at just 60 gold galleons. More intriguing still, the agency had thoughtfully provided a hidden back door that could only be opened from the inside. No need to face the front desk or explain anything further. Now that Ryan had made everything clear, Kate slipped through that secret exit and followed him home. Behind her, at the reception desk, a clerk waited in confusion. She peered down the empty hallway. "They're gone?" she muttered. "And the back door's magically sealed from the outside? Didn't that little witch seem curious?" Shaking her head, she tried the handle once more, still bewildered by their sudden disappearance. Chapter 71. The Welcoming Party. In the quiet morning light of Florin's ice delights, Florin Fusco leaned warily against the counter, idly tracing frost patterns on the glass display. With the new term about to begin, he ought to have been bustling with customers, but dawn was too early for ice cream. Wizarding parents rarely allowed their children frozen treats before school. He'd inherited the shop by default, lacking any better prospects, and with no landlord to answer to, he drifted into an easy, unambitious routine. On most days, he filled his time chatting with the occasional customer or helping young wizards puzzle over history assignments. His knowledge of magical lore was wide. He could recount the witch burnings of the Middle Ages with grim detail, and bore some intriguing stories about the Elder Wand and Ravenclaw's lost diadem. Yet this morning felt oddly unsettled. Just as Florin was contemplating a second cup of coffee, 3 young wizards shuffled in, their robes still creased from early rising. They hovered by the door, exchanging glances that made it impossible to tell whether they were friends, rivals, or something more complicated. Florin straightened up, curiosity pricking his boredom. Whatever their story, he suspected it would disrupt his lazy routine, and for once he welcomed the interruption. The handsome young wizard sat between the 2 witches, and it was clear they weren't merely friends or relatives. There was a definite romantic air about all 3 of them. The raven-haired witch often stole glances at him, and so did the taller blonde, each sharing a look that went beyond simple friendship. Florin watched them with growing curiosity. Which pairing was real, he wondered? Yet the strangest thing wasn't the tangled affections swirling around him. It was the utter silence. 20 minutes had passed, and not a single word had been exchanged. It had been almost 2 months since their underwater expedition. Back at Smith Castle, Ryan threw himself into reorganizing its interior, invoking the power of the Lord to reshape wards and corridors alike. Magically, the fortress was impenetrable. Voldemort had been driven back from its ramparts 3 separate times. Physically, however, it was the product of countless Smith generations. Over millennia, Smiths had patched every fissure and reinforced every beam, resulting in an elaborate layout that made perfect sense to no one but its creators, and which now stood as both marvel and maze. The castle's defenses had been re-examined from top to bottom. Farms and pastures would lie just inside the inner wards to guard against tainted supplies. The outermost tower, perched on the canyon's lip, would serve solely as the post tower. In wartime, no one was allowed to fly over the deep ravine. Any wizard foolish enough to teleport onto that ledge would simply plunge to their death. Once the new layout was settled, Penelope returned from France just as the school year was about to begin in September. Ever since Penelope left, Kate had been peppering her with letters. Every spare moment was seized to drop hints about the mysteries of Atlantis. To celebrate Penelope's homecoming, the three friends arranged to meet at Florin's Cold Drinks stand at 8 o'clock on the Monday morning of August 15, 1988. When Ryan finally spotted Penelope weaving through the early crowd, he couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Contrary to the original tale, where Hermione came back from her second-year summer in France with a deep bronze tan, Penelope's skin was still pale and flawless. The comparison struck him as almost laughable. Chapter 10: The Iron Fist of Political Correctness. In my previous life, I attended the premiere of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child at the London Court Theatre. Set 19 years after Voldemort's defeat, the play shows Harry, Ron, and Hermione as fully grown adults, juggling careers, marriages, and children. On stage, Harry is so overworked at the Ministry of Magic that his home life is a whirlwind. He's married with 3 school-aged kids, and he's constantly juggling paperwork, crises, and bedtime stories. What struck me most, though not in a good way, was the decision to cast Hermione as a black woman. J.K. Rowling herself, one of the play's credited authors, defended it as a statement of inclusiveness, but it felt forced, as if political correctness trumped fidelity to the original text. In Rowling's books, Hermione is unambiguously white, yet here she's tanned so darkly she might easily have been of mixed heritage. True equality, to me, isn't shoehorning different races into established roles. It's telling new stories about diverse people on their own terms, in their own times, with honesty and respect. We should face and accept history, not rewrite it for the sake of appearance. Then everything changed. Rowling spoke out against the trans activists who, in her view, were eroding women's rights. That stance triggered an online backlash fiercer than any Dark Lord. She was effectively exiled from Harry Potter fandom. 2 of the largest Potter fan sites purged her name. All images and text mentioning her work vanished overnight. Ironically, the same politically correct forces she'd once championed now struck her down. Alas, my poor Hermione, I found myself thinking, lamenting both the character's hijacked identity and the woman who created her. A crash of applause pulled me back to reality. I spotted Penelope across the lobby, someone I hadn't seen in years. My heart leapt. I barreled toward her and wrapped her in the warmest hug I could muster, relief flooding through me. She smelled like vanilla and old parchment, the perfect mix of comfort and adventure. "Ryan," she laughed, patting me on the back. Before I could catch my breath, she grinned and tugged me toward a quiet corner. "I've got a new mind game for us to try," she whispered, eyes shining with that mischievous spark I knew so well. "Damn," I muttered, half in awe, half in dread. Whatever Penelope had up her sleeve next, I knew it would be brilliant and completely unpredictable. "It has to be Kate," Ryan complained, his voice echoing through the rippling blue around them. With that declaration, their latest mental challenge began. Instantly, they found themselves plunged into a vivid underwater realm, an echo, it seemed, of their previous adventure. Penelope and Kate now wore shimmering mermaid forms, their iridescent tails fanning out in opalescent waves. Ryan, by contrast, had assumed the mantle of the Sea King, his head crowned with coral and pearls. Penelope and Kate stared at their own reflections in the water, cheeks flushing at the surreal beauty of their transformed bodies. Around them, the seabed glowed with bioluminescent flora and darting fish, but neither of them could shake the flutter of nerves in their chests. Ryan, however, was positively reveling in the scene, his eyes roaming hungrily over every gleaming scale and tendril of seaweed. "Where are our weapons?" Kate demanded, flicking her tail irritably. The novelty of mermaid life was undeniably breathtaking, but magnificent as it was, it offered little in the way of defense. Ryan waved a languid hand toward the sand. Mermaid weapons. Do I really need to spell it out? On the seabed lay a slender creature, no more than 10 inches long, a lobo worm, its body curved like a living ribbon, ending in a flexible nozzle. A lobo worm, Ryan announced, as if unveiling royal treasure, native to the depths of the North Sea. Simple in appearance, but its real power lies in the venom sac concealed within. Kate leaned closer. Venom? How does that help us? Ryan adopted an air of self-satisfaction and began to explain. When threatened, the worm contracts its venom sac and fires a precise jet of toxin. In the surrounding water, the venom doesn't disperse quickly, so it strikes its intended target without endangering everything else nearby. Penelope exchanged a glance with Kate. For better or worse, the lobo worm was now their weapon of choice. Whether it would be enough to meet whatever trial Ryan, now Sea King, had in store, remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. In this deep-sea domain, every creature's hidden defenses could become the key to survival. The mermaids had learned to weaponize the lobo worm's gill jets, firing torrents of water like oversized squirt guns. Penelope rattled off the creature's profile from memory, but the faint blush on her ears betrayed her. She was clearly trying to distract everyone from her drenched tunic. "Can either of you speak mermaid?" Ryan asked, turning to Kate. Kate shook her head. "No, mermaid was developed for underwater communication. On land, it sounds sharp and abrasive, but beneath the waves, it flows like music." Penelope blinked, as if startled back to the conversation. It's like how Miranda Goshawk's Book of Spells is translated into 72 languages, one of them mermaid. She trailed off, clearly hoping that answer would suffice. "Just admit you don't know," Kate muttered. Ryan waved his wand. "Anyway, in this challenge, we have to spray grindylows. Each time you hit one, you learn the pronunciation of a new mermaid word." A jet of cerulean sparks shot from his wand, striking a target with a satisfying crackle. A crisp, unfamiliar phrase echoed through the air. He grinned. "And if we're lucky, we might find summoning cards hidden around here." With a flourish, he produced a card edged in gleaming gold, its surface shimmering with the image of a coiling sea serpent. Everyone leaned in, anticipation sparking in their eyes. A brilliant blue creature broke the surface of the lagoon, its neck and head shaped like a stallion's, its sleek body tapering into the tail of a fish. Kate stared in surprise. "What's that for?" she asked, shading her eyes. "Shouldn't it be green?" Penelope chimed in, pushing strands of hair behind her ear. She'd always been the resident expert on magical beasts, and truth be told, she didn't look at all like a muggle girl trying to masquerade as a witch. "This sapphire hippocampus is enchanted for speed. You'll need it to keep pace with those fast, and ever faster, grindylows." Kate exchanged a quick look with Penelope, then turned back to the shimmering creature. Before she could ask another question, Ryan's voice rang out. "All right, no more dawdling. The game begins." In unison, Kate and Penelope knelt at the water's edge. Each girl held 2 wriggling lobo worms between her fingers, a tempting lure for their new mounts. The hippocampi flicked their tails impatiently, ready to surge forward at Ryan's signal. And with that, the race for the grindylows was officially underway. Chapter 72. Grindylow, Penelope, and Kate hovered just above the seabed, each clutching a sleek gray lobo worm, magical creatures that in their hands felt like living vacuum cleaners. They swept the ocean floor in neat, overlapping arcs, sifting through the snow-white gravel. Penelope barely registered the motion until Ryan's clear voice cut through the hum of the currents. "Begin!" At his command, the barren gravel bloomed with color. Scarlet, sapphire, violet, and every shade in between. Corals sprouted like living jewels. From the twisting branches and hidden hollows, a host of pale green creatures emerged. Grindylows, their knobby heads topped with twisted horns, watched with malevolent curiosity. Their jagged teeth gleamed, and long, spindly fingers dripped seawater. "Heh! Grindylows aren't to be underestimated," Kate called over the rushing water, pride dancing in her eyes. Her black hair fanned out around her, clinging to her ivory skin and lengthening in the current until it swirled protectively around her waist. They snatch fish, or even unsuspecting muggles and wizards, right out of the water with these claws. Penelope followed her gaze to the creature's notorious weapons, delicate, tapering fingers, each tipped with a wicked hook. Their greatest strength is also their greatest weakness, Kate continued. Those slender fingers pack surprising power, but they're brittle. Once they can't grip, they've lost every advantage. An extraction charm, an unhooking charm, breaks their hold instantly. Ryan raised his wand, the water around its tip shimmering with pent-up power. On my mark, now! Silvery streams of magical energy shot from the group's wands, streaking through the water toward the nearest Grindylows. With each strike, a creature's claws unclenched, and it drifted limp and harmless into the open sea. The battle for the seabed had begun in earnest. Penelope floated just above the sandy seabed, voice calm and measured through her regulator. No, the extraction charm only turns into a column of scalding water when you cast it underwater. It's handy for defense, but hardly a game-changer. Our real objective is to use the loba worm to take out as many Grindylow as possible. She paused, marveling at how natural it all felt. Despite being submerged in warm ocean currents, she spoke and breathed as if she were standing on solid ground. The only awkwardness came from her attire. Had her magically lengthened hair not swooped down to cover the important parts, she'd be mortified, especially with Ryan lurking around. She shot him a warning glare. Kate drifted in beside her, mask reflecting excitement. "So what's our plan of attack?" she asked, eager to fine-tune their approach. From the other side, Ryan couldn't resist butting in. He waved a gloved hand. "Wait, aren't you two wondering why this is a shooting match scored like a sport? Why do fallen merfolk syllables count as rewards? Come on, this is clearly a head-to-head challenge." He smirked and added, "Plus, there's talk of a mysterious grand prize." Penelope shook her head and refocused. Ryan's antics wouldn't derail them. In her first few strokes, she'd already discovered that swimming beneath the waves was nothing like running on land. Her movements felt fluid, almost as if she'd sprouted a fishtail. She mentally reviewed their tactics, determined to outswim, outshoot, and outscore every Grindylow in these enchanted depths. Penelope guided her tail through the water with a mere thought, trusting that even if Ryan's prank held hidden motives, it certainly wasn't aimless. Lacking a magic wand, their only hope against Grindylow lay in the venom of the rare loba worm. Their first order of business, gauge its potency, then adapt their plan. That task now belonged to Kate. At Ryan's cue, the waters turned turbulent, an ominous prelude to the slaughter Ryan found so entertaining, though Penelope preferred strategy over spectacle. Kate, using her height advantage, dove among the coral spires and methodically applied small doses of the loba venom. Penelope hover, D in her blind spot, nets at the ready, scooping up any fish that wriggled free. In her mind, she counted the seconds until the toxin kicked in. 1, 3, 4, 5. There was an undeniable allure in watching a clever woman execute her strategy with such grace. As if on command, a radiant gold card flared into being above them. The sea around the reef heaved, hurling fragments of coral into the surge. From the churning depths rose the formidable sea beast, its head shaped like a horse's, its lower body a powerful fish's tail. It dipped its massive skull in a single thunderous nod. At Penelope's silent signal, Kate sprang upward, spear poised for the kill. Penelope steadied herself, adjusting her aim with precision. With the horse-headed, fish-tailed monster marshaled at their side, the staged battle reached its thrilling climax, and the game was won. Penelope straightened her back and glared at Ryan. "All right, Ryan, what's this extra reward you promised?" She and Kate perched atop the strange sea creature, a horse's head, fish's tail leviathan, and glided in lazy circles around him. Ryan frowned, and Penelope felt her cheeks warm. Kate, however, seemed oblivious to Penelope's embarrassment. She kept tugging Ryan's sleeve, peppering him with eager questions. Okay, Ryan said at last, raising his hands. His voice dropped into a low, musical tone. Suddenly, golden and black notes rained down around them, twisting into the shape of two slender books. One hovered before Penelope, the other drifted to Kate. The moment the books touched their hands, a flood of knowledge burst into their minds. Words, sounds, and intricate grammar rules of the merfolk tongue swept past so quickly that both girls reeled, eyes glazing over. In that dizzying instant, they felt as they'd spent hours struggling to memorize every pronunciation and every nuance of meaning. Then Ryan's voice, warm and lilting, slipped through the chaos, gently soothing their frazzled thoughts. And the winner is you, Kate. Your reward is... Kate could hardly contain herself. She jabbed at Ryan with the tablet she'd been carrying. Come on, faster! What is it? Penelo reached out and grabbed Kate's arm to pull her back, but Kate only laughed, her eyes bright with anticipation. She rattled off more questions faster than Ryan could answer, determined to learn the secret of her prize. Ryan merely smiled, enjoying every frantic second. The reward, he knew, would be worth the suspense. As soon as the triumphant ding, ding, ding chimed in Ryan's mind, both Kate and Penelope blinked, shaking off the shared vision. In the real world, Ryan was already holding out a small, ornately wrapped box. He handed it to Kate, who tore the ribbon off without hesitation and lifted the lid. Inside lay a slender wristband, its clasp crowned by a tiny rotating knob. Ryan smiled. This band gathers and stores sunlight all day long. When night falls, or whenever you need light, just twist the knob. Darkness will vanish, and it'll shine as bright as dawn. Kate turned the band over in her hand, her smirk widening as she caught Penelope's eye. A portable magic lamp, she drawled. How pedestrian. Kate Lewenster, you little... Penelope began, but Ryan raised a hand to forestall further bickering. Listen, he said, voice calm but firm. This isn't ordinary sunlight. Even that legendary hand of glory, the relic said to blot out the sun, couldn't dim the glow this wristband unleashes. He paused, eyeing the device with a mix of pride and restraint. I've never been keen on alchemy, but before I was 7, I dedicated myself to the ancient Smith family's craft. Thousands of years of perfected lore. What looks like a simple gadget is in fact one of the most potent creations I've ever forged. After the duel wrapped up, Ryan strolled over to the ice cream cart and ordered a second triple scoop of nut-flavored ice cream. He settled at a shaded bench with Penelo and Kate, eager to recount every last detail of his upcoming trip to France. But each time he launched into the juicy parts, Penelo would abruptly steer the conversation elsewhere, and Kate never failed to back her up. Watching from the edge of the courtyard, Flint frowned. The three of them were huddled in low voices, passing a small, wrapped package between them. Had that clandestine gift been what ignited their earlier quarrel? He muttered under his breath so Ryan could hear, Your department's a total shambles. Are you guys even up to date on wizarding affairs? Ryan caught Flint's gaze and chuckled, leaning back on the bench. You mean like that poor fellow who got captured by Death Eaters and murdered for knowing the secrets of Ravenclaw's diadem and the Elder Wand? Flint snorted in disgust. How do you reckon they found out? It's not as if he went around bragging. By late afternoon, Ryan had accompanied Penelo and Kate to Flourish and Blots to stock up on books and supplies for next term. As they tucked their new potion-making guides and quills into their bags, Ryan stretched and declared he was off. He waved farewell, ice cream cone in hand, and headed back toward the castle, more than ready for a quiet evening in the common room. Chapter 73, A New Release. The days that followed passed in an uncharacteristic calm. After his voyage to the sunken city, Ryan had come to a sobering realization. He was not indispensable. Wizards had thrived long before he arrived, and even if the underwater clan were to vanish tomorrow, magic itself would endure. In fact, the confusion charm, the bedrock of contemporary spellwork, was steadily advancing. Someday, it might approach the sophistication of the legendary Fidelius charm, enabling wizards to inscribe secrets directly into another's mind. At that point, even nuclear warheads and superweapons would pose no threat. Could Dumbledore have anticipated such progress? After all, Muggle studies has been a Hogwarts elective since third year and remains one of the OWL subjects. But theory and reality often move at different paces. In any case, the wizarding world was about to experience a different kind of stir. On July 29, 1991, an excited throng of young witches and wizards packed the sidewalk outside Flourish and Blots. They chatted eagerly, wands and cauldrons in tow, waiting for the doors to open. Above the entrance, a banner fluttered in the warm afternoon breeze. Doraemon, the Dinosaur Kingdom. Pre-sale at 50% off. Includes limited edition gold author-signed card sale. Starts at 1:30 p.m. A ripple of delight ran through the crowd. It seemed this summer's hottest read had just hit the shelves. Today, while supplies last, Flourish and Blots was humming with customers, their ears catching onto a most unexpected soundtrack, the theme song from a popular comic playing over the store's speakers. Shoppers paused amid dusty tomes and new releases to listen. Every day is the same until inspiration calls. With Doraemon by my side, my dreams can fly beyond the stars. He shares my joy, he soothes my sorrow. One peek in his magic pocket and all my troubles vanish. Together we journey to distant lands in search of legendary treasure. Ang ang ang, Doraemon and I will let our dreams shine. Ang ang ang, Doraemon and I will let our dreams shine. In a crowded corner, 3 fiery-haired figures stood out. The smallest of the 3, tall, thin, freckled, and sporting a long nose, tugged anxiously at one of his brother's sleeves. "Fred," he whispered, glancing around, "do you think Mum will find us when we come out?" The older boy rolled his eyes and shook his head. "I'm not Fred, I'm George." "Honestly, Ron," George sighed, flashing his signature crooked grin, "how many times do I have to tell you that?" The third boy, Ron, pressed his lips into a thin line and raised his hands in surrender. "Fine, George," he muttered. "But if Mum spots us in here, don't say I didn't warn you." Together, the 3 redheads melted back into the crowd, their laughter and mischief almost drowned out by Doraemon's triumphant refrain. "Just kidding, I'm Fred." The taller of the red-headed twins tossed back his hair with a grin. Before Ron could scowl, George chimed in. "All right, Ron. Fred, now trot along and tell Mum we've joined the line for Ginny's book signing." Fred winked at his brother. "Dad's raving about this book, too. Says it's packed with inspiration." George leaned forward conspiratorially. "And if someone snags a golden ticket or gets the author's autograph, we could flip it for 10 galleons easy." Ron, freckles dusting his cheeks, long nose wrinkled in skepticism, ran a hand through his flame-red hair. "If it were me, I'd never sell it." "That's exactly why it works," George said. "It's half price today, only 2 galleons, and we're only buying 1 copy." "Right," Ron muttered, his shoulders slumping. "1 copy, and once you've finished reading, I'm the one who keeps it." Fred laughed, fishing 2 gold galleons from his pocket and waving them teasingly. "No chance, Ron. If there's only 1 book, how can we be sure we'll win the draw? These extra coins cover a second entry. Who knows, maybe we'll even make a profit when it's all over." Ron sighed, but a reluctant smile tugged at his lips. "Fine, but remember, I'm still keeping it." Fred and George exchanged triumphant grins. Let the games begin. By 1:30, George and Fred burst through the crush like 2 runaway bludgers, and moments later reappeared clutching 3 identical slim volumes, each one emblazoned with a sapphire-skinned civet cat on its cover. "Fred, didn't they say 1 per person?" Ron called from the edge of the crowd, his voice low and incredulous. George flashed a grin. "Ah, but this is pure Muggle magic. A lot of witches and wizards dismiss their gizmos as trivial, yet they excel at one thing: concealment." Fred winked. "I paid 3 gold galleons for these. The one I care about is this silver tier card, Anywhere Door. Exactly what I need." George tapped his own book affectionately. "I went for the bamboo dragonfly, bronze tier. Brilliant little contraption." Ron, still fuming at being left outside the circle, shoved his hand into his robes and drew out a card that gleamed like molten gold. Across its face was printed a slender, red-bound book, overlaid with twisted black sigils. He stared in stunned silence. This is the Devil's Passport." A ripple of excitement ran through the courtyard. "Gold card," someone gasped. "That long-nosed kid's got a gold card. It must be a Weasley." Within seconds, a crowd had formed around Ron. He flushed, tugged at his robes, and raised the card for all to see. Okay, here, take it," he snapped, thrusting the glittering card into Fred's hand. "Just get me a good price." Fred and George exchanged a look, then barred the onlookers with fierce grins. "No selling," Fred declared. "This one's ours." "Absolutely," George added. "We're keeping it." Disappointed murmurs drifted through the throng. A few muttered curses and drifted off. Others pouted, hoping for another chance. But Fred and George stood firm, the gold card clutched in Fred's fist. Ron stared at them, aghast. "You're crazy. I have to." George held up a handsome, leather-bound book. "Relax, Ron. You just drew this rare first-edition compendium of Celtic charms. Lucky find, eh?" Fred slipped the volume into his other pocket. "And by the way," he said, "we're sending this one straight to Ginny." With that, the twins turned on their heels, vanishing into the dispersing crowd. Ron gaped after them, glaring at the empty space where the brothers had stood. A tiny voice piped up at his elbow. Ron looked down and saw Kate, a fifth year no taller than a first year, tugging at Ryan's robe. "But Ryan, your book is all the rage right now," she protested, eyes wide. "You promised me a copy," Ron sighed. It looked like he'd have to start hunting for yet another rare treasure. Another day at the wizarding market, where luck, after all, was in short supply. Ryan's mischievous grin stretched from ear to ear. "How's that, Kate? You as tall as me now?" With a playful snort, he hoisted his little sister high above his head, an impish reenactment of Rafiki lifting Simba in The Lion King. Kate screamed with delight, her tiny legs kicking in midair. 3 years had flown by since that carefree afternoon. Now on the verge of starting school, Ryan's secret age could no longer stay hidden, and with it came another revelation, the truth behind Penelope's mysterious origins. After years of hushed whispers, the story was finally out. Penelope was the sole heir of a long-lost royal line, secretly adopted by loving guardians determined to protect her from those who would exploit her heritage. But Ryan hadn't just been growing older, he'd been busy inventing. Drawing on his boundless imagination, he somehow brought Doraemon, the blue, pocket-laden robotic cat from his favorite manga, into the real world. The effect was instantaneous. Doraemon became a global sensation. Even Draco Malfoy, the proudest of pureblood nobles, was spotted tiptoeing into Ryan's workshop to buy the latest volumes of the Doraemon saga behind closed doors. Meanwhile, the local epic had taken an unexpected turn. The hero of the story was now Luke Skywalker, a decidedly ordinary British boy with no trace of Force sensitivity. His pedigree was impeccable. His father, Anakin Skywalker, and mother, Padme Amidala, counted among the galaxy's greatest figures. But young Luke's report cards at Jedi Elementary School were dismal. Obi-Wan Kenobi, the schoolmaster, punished his endless mistakes by relegating him to stand in the dusty corner of Classroom Beta 5 until he mastered basic lightsaber etiquette. Luke's sole beacon of hope was Mara Jade. Clever and courageous, Mara endured daily torment at the hands of the school bully, Darth Vader, and his henchman, Count Dooku. Despite their taunts, she never lost her composure, and Luke suspected her heart secretly belonged to the class's star pupil, Qui-Gon Jinn. Rumor had it the two often exchanged furtive glances and whispered conversations behind the holoprojector, which only fueled Luke's admiration and envy in equal measure. In this world where royal secrets emerged, invented robots strolled the streets, and Jedi schoolchildren lived out their dramas, nothing remained predictable. Every day held the promise of a new adventure, one that would challenge ancient legacies and redefine the destinies of everyone involved. One afternoon, after once again returning home with a 0 on his test, Luke Skywalker found himself staring at an impossibly cheerful blue cat. The newcomer introduced himself in an urgent rush. "I'm Doraemon, sent here from the future by your descendant Ben Skywalker. I'm your family's nanny cat, and my mission is to change your miserable fate before it's too late." From that moment on, Luke's life once humdrum and dreared into a nonstop adventure. Whenever some bully knocked him down or luck abandoned him, Doraemon simply dug into his four-dimensional pocket and produced the perfect gizmo. Time-bending cloths, instant translation jellies, you name it. No problem was too big for his miraculous toolkit. Watching all this, Luke's brother Ryan grew inspired to push his own magical comic book to the next level. In their world, storybook characters could already move on the page, but thanks to Ryan's new techniques, they could actually speak to readers too. It was an achievement even more impressive than the famous talking painting in the Royal Gallery. Their whole family pitched in on the project. Penelope lent her voice, literally, to record the theme song for Doraemon, giving it a warm, lively touch. Kate applied her graphic talents to design a series of collectible character cards, each one lovingly illustrated and printed. That very morning, with so many errands ahead, Penelope had dashed off to Florin Ice Cream Shop to grab everyone's favorite flavors. Meanwhile, Kate and Ryan lingered at home, gathering the textbooks, art supplies, and other materials they'd need for the new school term, eager to see how Doraemon's gadgets and their freshly enchanted storybook might turn ordinary days into extraordinary ones. It has been only a few days since Ryan's new book hit the shelves. Today is July 31st, 1991, Ryan's birthday, and fittingly the birthday of Harry Potter, the boy who lived. By now, Harry must have discovered his wizarding heritage and met Rubus Hagrid, Hogwarts' beloved gamekeeper, often called the King of Monsters and, as some whisper, the last of his line. Why last? The original tale never hinted that Hagrid and Madame Maxime, headmistress of Beauxbaton's Academy in France, would one day marry and raise children together. 17 years after Voldemort's defeat, when Harry's own son marched through Hogwarts gates, Harry's sole instruction was a reminder to stop in at Hagrid's hut for tea, proof that Hagrid was still on staff, teaching care of magical creatures. Now it is high noon on Ryan's birthday, and he celebrates at the sprawling Smith Castle. With the aid of the castle's hearth spirit, a benevolent flame-dwelling entity, Ryan has just unveiled the most impressive alchemical masterwork any Smith has produced in years. This grand new creation, perfectly in keeping with the castle's ancient style, stands as the crowning achievement of his 3 years of study. Smith Castle that you see before you isn't the true stronghold, but a facade, a magical projection tethered to our world. The real castle, the true heart of Ryan's domain, lies safely hidden in a separate dimension Ryan opened with the aid of the Lord God. Yes, an entirely new dimension. This trick mirrors the principle behind the Fidelius charm. You select a wizard to serve as secret keeper, embed the location you wish to conceal in that wizard's soul, and once the spell takes hold, the hidden site effectively slips into another realm. As Professor Rivalries famously put it, so long as the secret keeper refuses to speak, no inquisitive soul, no matter how thoroughly he tears apart the village where the Potters have lived for decades, no matter how closely he presses his nose to their living room window, will ever uncover their home. In Ryan's case, the Lord God himself fills the role of secret keeper, an immortal, indestructible spirit whose essence is beyond any form of divination or coercion. That makes the real Smith Castle entirely inaccessible to the outside world, and renders Ryan effectively invincible. He glanced at his watch. In the castle's open courtyard, the runes of the teleportation circle began to glow one by one. In a flash of light, Penelope and Kate appeared, each wearing a gleaming bracelet that served as the key to the array. Where a stretch of lawn once lay, the earth had opened into a softly lit grotto. Hundreds of living fairies drifted through the air, their delicate wings scattering light like glittering jewels. Some settled amid enchanted rose bushes, others flitted across statues of legendary beasts, phoenixes with flaming plumes, thunderbirds crackling with ethereal energy, and other majestic creatures brought to life by magic. Despite the breathtaking spectacle that Ryan had so carefully arranged, it was clear that all eyes were on the two women standing before him. Penelope's golden hair caught the glow of the fairy lights, framing an intelligent, serene face. Her flowing sapphire robes hinted at a tall, lithe figure beneath. Beside her, Kate's raven-black hair contrasted sharply with her porcelain skin and large dark eyes, giving her a doll-like appearance. Her pristine white sorceress's gown complemented her petite frame and impish charm. "Welcome to Smith Castle," they announced together, voices bright with excitement. Penelope stepped forward and offered Ryan a neatly wrapped box. "Happy birthday, Ryan," she said softly. Kate practically bounced to his side and produced a delicate necklace from the folds of her robe. "Happy birthday, you little brat," she teased, fastening the pendant around his neck. "It's just for you." Ryan smiled, touched by their warmth, and enchanted by the world they had brought to life for his special day. "Why isn't it wrapped?" Ryan teased, reaching out to fiddle with the necklace in Penelope's. "And don't worry, it's just a regular necklace, enchanted to stay pristine. As long as it's around wizards, or worn by one, it can't tarnish." Penelope stared at the tiny, iridescent figures dancing around them. "Who are these fairies, anyway?" "Found in a forest not far from here," Ryan explained. "They're notoriously vain creatures, always decked out in ribbons and sparkles. Wizards discovered that by flattering their vanity, they can use fairies as living decorations. Their sense of style is actually superior to ours, which makes them perfect for dressing up a castle, and more importantly, it keeps them away from their natural predator, the divination bird." He plucked a delicate, translucent wing from the air, examining its shimmering colors. "See these? Purely ornamental, painless for the fairy to lose, and easy to replace. Alchemists prize them as potion ingredients." Penelope's brow furrowed. But doesn't removing their wings upset them? Terribly, Ryan admitted with a wry smile. Take a wing, and they think they've lost their beauty. If you plan to keep them around, you'll also have to clear out the tree guardians. They sometimes feast on fairy eggs. So yes, they can brighten up a castle, but you'd better watch your back. I heard you wanted them to decorate the castle, not just serve as decorations themselves, Kate said, her voice brimming with curiosity. How did you manage that, Ryan? Those little buzzing creatures started out as nothing more than holiday ornaments for wizards. They don't even speak a word. How could you get them to design the castle interior? Penelope chimed in, equally baffled. Surely you can't communicate with them through normal speech. What trick did you use? Ryan simply smiled. Well, today happens to be my birthday. Let me show you. He reached out with his thoughts, linking minds with the Goublé fairies. The heavy oak doors swung open on their own, and a gentle melody began to swell through the hall. In an instant, the grand chamber transformed around them. Crystalline icicles dripped from the marble staircase's handrails, yet never melted. From the evergreen boughs lining the walls, tiny baubles and bright holly berries twirled into existence, and lofting above it all, a living golden phoenix emerged, its soft chirps weaving into the unfolding tune. Even the fairy fire lamps flared and shifted shape, coalescing into a glowing jungle fairy whose melodious voice joined the ensemble as she sang a warm, happy birthday that echoed through every corner of the hall. The late afternoon light turned the castle grounds into a shimmering landscape of frost. From a distance, its turrets and battlements looked as if they'd been crafted from gingerbread and dusted with powdered sugar. Inside the great hall, a banquet appeared almost as magically. Platters of spiced stews, golden fried delicacies, and an array of delicate desserts, each one a favorite of Ryan, Kate, and Penelope. Laughter and music filled the air as host and guests celebrated well into the evening. At last, the time came for goodbyes. Penelope pressed a warm kiss to Ryan's cheek before hugging Kate, who did the same in turn. Moments later, they slipped away into the night, leaving Ryan alone in the now silent castle. He paused by a high window, gazing out at the darkening sky. It must be around now, he murmured to himself, when Harry Potter has just finished stocking up on school supplies in Diagon Alley and is heading back with Hagrid to the Muggle world he can't stand. The thought brought a faint smile to his lips and a touch of boredom. With nothing left to do, Ryan closed his eyes and willed himself elsewhere. In an instant, he materialized amid the busy crowds of Paddington Station. He blended unnoticed into the throng of travelers, his cloak drawn close. Not far off, a tall man in an overcoat stood on the platform, waving as a scarlet steam engine hissed and chuffed. At one of the carriage windows, a thin boy knelt on the cold pavement, his nose pressed against the glass. His eyes were fixed on the man on the packed platform, watching until the train's whistle faded into the distance, and the figure on the platform finally disappeared from view. Harry's character sheet: race, wizard, strength 4, 10, constitution, 17 and 10, magic, 30, 10, skills, parcel tongue, level 5, 34% toward level 6, mathematics, level 3, 12% toward level 4. These figures make Harry's magical talent extraordinarily high, especially when compared to the most accomplished aurors in their 20s. Unfortunately, a wizard's power develops at a glacial pace. There's no shortcut or rigorous training regime to accelerate it. Magic simply accumulates with age. Even Rubeus Hagrid, descended from a proud line of magic users, has only managed to raise his own magic score to 26 over several years. Chapter 75, First Encounter. Ryan hovered just beyond the bustling crowd, unable to stifle a laugh. The boy he'd idolized as a child, Harry Potter, was making his grand entrance exactly as he'd always imagined. Having grown up on Rowling's novels, seeing Harry in person felt like meeting an old friend. For nearly 4 years, he'd forced himself to stay away from number 4, Privet Drive, resisting every urge to sneak a peek at this boy who shared his fate. He knew laughter was hardly appropriate, but Ryan's peculiar gift allowed him to see every detail, even as the scarlet train thundered past. There, clinging to the carriage window, was Harry. His nose pressed comically flat, his emerald eyes wide with wonder. The sight was impossibly endearing. Ryan bit back a grin, melting into the shadows like an unseen wraith atop the carriage, utterly absorbed in watching the little wizard. Harry Potter was no ordinary child. Already he bore the mark of three magics. The first was love, selfless, protective maternal love that wrapped around him, suffusing every inch of his skin and every corner of his soul. End of chapter. The second type of magic sent a chill through anyone who sensed it, cold, dead, ominous. It was bound up so tightly with Harry Potter's own aura that were it not for Ryan's reconnaissance skill, having reached level 5 over the past 3 years, he might never have detected it. And then there was the third type, Harry's personal magic. Pure and vibrant, it felt like morning dew on your skin, impossibly full of life for a boy who'd grown up in such a brutal, loveless world. Ryan shook his head, marveling at his own ignorance. I really underestimated it, he admitted to himself. This magic of love isn't Harry Potter the greatest example. With that thought, he shifted his consciousness, virtualizing himself into the dimension where Smith Castle hovered. He steered clear of a newly formed tunnel in the ether, keeping a watchful eye on the castle's defenses. His mind went back to what he knew of Horcruxes. They were the antithesis of a human soul, a fragment severed and anchored to a vessel so that, no matter what befell the living body, the soul piece would survive. But that survival hinged entirely on the container remaining intact. And a living Horcrux, Harry Potter himself, was without precedent. It's the first ever. Ryan murmured, a living Horcrux, truly rare. When a Horcrux vessel is damaged beyond repair, the soul fragments it contains are destroyed along with it, and Harry Potter is exactly such a vessel. The comparison sprang to Ryan's mind instantly. Harry is like a magical Jinchuriki, carrying within him the remnants of a powerful, malevolent soul. On the night of October 31st, 1981, Voldemort unleashed Avada Kedavra on Harry, only to have the curse rebound off Lily Evans's sacrificial protection. Voldemort was stripped of his body and reduced to something less than a ghost. Unbeknownst to him, that same night he made Harry Potter his Horcrux. Over the next 10 years, 3 streams of magic, Voldemort's hidden soul fragment, Lily's protective love, and Harry's own latent power, wove themselves into a single, inseparable force. Whenever Harry's life is threatened or his emotions run high, both the shattered piece of Voldemort and Lily's love surge forward to defend him. That's why, in the leaky cauldron, it was perfectly safe for Quirrell to take Harry's hand, until Quirrell tried to harm him. At that touch, Lily's protection flared back through Harry's skin, scorching Quirrell's face and throwing him sprawling into the street. In that moment, it became clear. Just as Quirrell carried a fragment of Voldemort, Harry himself bears 1/7 of the Dark Lord's soul, and it is this bond, intertwined with a mother's sacrificial magic and Harry's own resilience, that has kept the boy alive. It was still unclear who was the older brother and who was the younger. As the Hogwarts Express rattled down the tracks, something deep within Harry, Lily Evans's magic, began to stir. Fine, almost invisible, threads of power reached back toward number 4, Privet Drive, binding him to the only family he had on his mother's side. From Ryan's vantage point, Harry's initial shock at leaving Hagrid's care and meeting the Dursleys had already been softened by an inexplicable surge of love. That gentle warmth was helping to purify the fragment of Voldemort's soul lodged within him. What remained of that 1/7 piece of darkness had long since transformed into pure, neutral magic. Though the shattered soul shards persisted, their consciousness had collapsed into chaos, no longer the self-aware Horcrux capable of seduction or self-resurrection. In Harry, they now existed only as dormant power. Is this why Dumbledore insisted Harry live with the Dursleys? Ryan murmured, propping his head on his hand as he drifted invisibly above the seat. To give Lily's magic time and space to digest the last vestige of Voldemort's soul, he concluded, tapping his chin as his thoughts raced. With that insight, Ryan finally made his decision. Within the true Smith Castle, a faint, candlelit glow materialized out of thin air and clung to Harry's scar. Harry, you've got 2 magical powers coursing through you, Ryan drawled, a sly smirk playing on his lips. I've come to stir up some fun. This Harry bore no resemblance to Daniel Radcliffe's on-screen portrayal. In reality, his features were slender, almost ethereal, softer and more refined than any film could capture. His raven black hair, the Potter family's signature bird's nest cut, was perpetually tousled, neither long nor short, yet unmistakably charming. Ryan shook his head, feigning envy. I could kill for hair like that. Despite its apparent disorder, the hairstyle somehow suited Harry perfectly. Legend held that no Potter ever truly needed a barber. Their hair naturally maintained the ideal length. Harry's Aunt Petunia had once tried desperately to tame that wild mop, which, of course, matched James's exactly, but every trim only left him looking as though he'd never had a haircut at all. Petunia Dursley once lost her temper, and in a fit of pique, snatched a pair of kitchen scissors and hacked away at Harry's hair, leaving only a single fringe across his forehead to cover that awful scar. But the next morning, when Harry tumbled out of bed, his unruly black hair had miraculously returned to its former length and shape. A self-restoring hairstyle like his was truly a godsend for the chronically lazy. Ryan, by contrast, had no such luxury. His hair demanded constant attention, obedient only to the finely tuned control he maintained through his body transformation arts. Keeping it neat and tidy was a daily routine he couldn't avoid, which was why, when an opportunity arose to shadow Harry at number 4, Privet Drive, Ryan accepted it without hesitation. Anticipating that Albus Dumbledore, or someone watching in his stead, might grow suspicious, Ryan decided to deploy a diversion. He tapped into a potent strand of dark magic he had picked up from a wandering sorcerer in Nocturne Alley. With a whispered incantation, he unleashed the spell. Then, in an instant, he vanished from the Dursleys' living room. The following morning, sunlight streamed through the high windows of Smith Castle's oak-paneled study. Ryan settled down at a long mahogany table, poured himself a cup of strong coffee, and unfolded the latest issue of the Daily Prophet. As he read, his thoughts drifted back to the events at Privet Drive, and to the questions that still lay ahead. Ryan scrolled past the surprise photo of Ron flashing a gold card, and its cheeky caption, when another headline caught his eye. The Ministry of Magic had just raided Nocturne Alley, rounding up dozens of dark wizards. Whispers in the Daily Prophet claimed the operation was tied to Ludo Bagman's illegal gambling debts. Curiously, there was no mention of the darker rumor that these criminals had tried to break into Gringotts' vaults. To Ryan's knowledge, Quirrell had infiltrated the bank himself, not long after Hagrid had spirited the Philosopher's Stone away. He frowned. What a shame. If Bagman's in custody, what happens to those VIP Quidditch World Cup tickets the Weasleys were counting on? Will Harry even make it to the match? He tapped another article. Could Barty Crouch Jr. have slipped through ministry lines and escaped Voldemort's notice? The report was blunt. No, Voldemort himself tracked down the fugitive, acting on tips from Bertha Jorkins. Ryan let out a relieved breath. At that very moment, a faint shimmer appeared at the corner of his view. A new skill, Love Level 11%, began to materialize. Chapter 76, King's Cross Station. Oh, Harry's power is back. Ryan allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. He realized, too, that Ludo Bagman's capture wouldn't derail his plans after all. Relief washed over him. Voldemort would still need Harry's blood to regain full strength, and his own daily life would remain undisturbed. But that relief was instantly replaced by shame. An innocent witch had been swept up in this scheme. Ryan knew that people fighting for their survival often set aside moral qualms. Yet he also knew he was different. Unlike the ordinary time travelers bound to preserve a story's original course, he no longer had to worry about keeping every plot detail intact. If he could protect himself in this world, even become invincible, he wouldn't abandon his sense of right and wrong. After all, Bertha Jorkins might be a minor supporting character compared to Harry, his stalwart companion since childhood, but in the real world, she was a living, breathing person with loved ones who cared about her. Morality wasn't an optional add-on, it was a responsibility. Bertha Jorkins had once been famous for her near-photographic memory and an insatiable curiosity that often drove her to pry into other people's business. Unfortunately for her, that same curiosity led her to uncover Barty Crouch's deepest secret. As punishment, Crouch, acting on Voldemort's orders, cast a powerful forgetting spell over her. Her brilliant mind went blank, and everything she had discovered slipped from her memory. That summer, the one immediately after Harry's 3rd year, Harry and Ron accompanied Mr. Weasley on a trip into the wilds of Albania to remove dangerous magical creatures. Deep in the forest, they stumbled onto Peter Pettigrew, Wormtail, who'd been hiding among the local fauna. Unaware of the danger, Bertha Jorkins had also followed Wormtail into the woods, driven by the same reckless curiosity. Before she could realize her mistake, Wormtail seized her, subdued her completely, and delivered her into Voldemort's hands. Once in Voldemort's presence, poor Bertha discovered just how merciless the Dark Lord could be. Rather than simply using legilimency, the magical art of mind-reading, Voldemort subjected her to repeated, excruciating tortures designed to make her talk. He wanted more than scraps of memory. He wanted every last detail. Under normal circumstances, he could have read Crouch's own legion-proofing wards and forced knowledge from Bertha's mind, but the forgetting spell Crouch had used was so powerful that even legilimency could not penetrate it. Voldemort's solution was to break the enchantment by sheer force of pain. For days, Bertha endured unimaginable agony. Every interrogation drove her deeper into terror, until finally the amnesiac barrier shattered and all her suppressed memories flooded back. She told Voldemort everything: the existence of the Triwizard Tournament at Hogwarts, the identity of the mysterious Alastor Moody, who would serve as a new defense against the dark arts professor, and, most crucial of all, the confirmation that Barty Crouch was one of Voldemort's most faithful supporters. In the aftermath, even Sirius Black, who should have known better, dismissed Bertha as a silly woman. But those who truly understood what she'd endured knew how cruelly she'd been broken and rebuilt, all at Voldemort's whim. The price of her curiosity had been more than memory. It had been her very sense of self. She was fractiously curious and yet utterly clueless, so easily led into snares. Still, that didn't mean she deserved to die. September 1st arrived in a crisp rush. To spare himself and his friends from idle gossip, Ryan slipped into King's Cross Station alone, rather than turning up with Penelope and Kate. Of course, his real motive was far less heroic. He wanted to watch a proper film, in a darkened theater, with popcorn and everything. He recalled all too clearly how Harry Potter had once fared here. 10:30 was the scheduled arrival. By 10:50, he was still wandering, bewitched by the station's maze of tsetse orators. Only with the Weasleys' timely assistance had he discovered the barrier and reached platform 9 3/4 with just 10 minutes to spare. Now it was exactly 10:30. Ryan drew a silver pocket watch from his coat, not because he needed to check the time. His mind contained a clock more precise than any enchanted horologe, but simply to project the image of a normal wizard, relying on old-fashioned magic. Sure enough, as he slipped the watch back into his pocket, two figures emerged from the crowd a few yards away. Observers might easily mistake them for an affectionate couple. Vernon Dursley stood beside the car at King's Cross Station, hefting Harry's battered suitcase onto a handcart. With a deliberate smirk, he gave the cart a push toward the barrier between platforms 9 and 10. "Your train's supposed to leave from between here and platform 10, he said, voice dripping with false cheer. "I guess they haven't bothered finishing platform 9 yet, have they? Good luck at school," he added, flashing Harry an even meaner grin. Then he turned on his heel and walked back to the car, where Petunia and Dudley waited, chuckling triumphantly, as though they'd just pulled off the greatest joke of their lives. Harry stood alone on the empty stretch of brick and iron. A huge plastic 9 glared to his left, a matching 10 to his right. Hedwig hooted anxiously from her cage, and Harry's lips felt parched. He licked them once, twice, trying to summon courage. A passing guard stepped by, but before Harry could call out for help, a heavy hand landed on his shoulder. Harry jumped. Turning, he found a boy with sharp eyes and a sardonic grin. "Hey," the boy said, tilting his head. "You're a first year at Hogwarts, right? I'm Ryan Smith." Harry blinked, doubt and relief warring in his chest. Here, at least, was someone who spoke his language, and might even help him find Platform 9 Coursource. Harry's eyes widened as the boy before him, his very first-year peer, turned and offered a smile that could have been carved from marble. Raven-black hair framed moonlit eyes, and a perfect row of white teeth flashed at Harry. Heat flooded Harry's cheeks, and he hastily nodded, blinking away his embarrassment. Oddly, no one else seemed to register this newcomer's breathtaking appearance. Even odder, the boy carried nothing, no trunk, no cage, no owl. Did you put your luggage on the bus? Harry asked, voice catching. The boy laughed softly and waved a hand. No need. Everything's right here on me. I'm practically weightless. Harry blinked. Oh, okay, but how did you? Harry Potter, right? The boy's dark eyes gleamed as he reached out to touch Harry's lightning-shaped scar. Platform 9 3/4 is at the third pillar between platforms 9 and 10. Just head straight for the barrier. Harry stared, astonished. The boy, Ryan, he realized, seemed to know everything about him. Don't stop. Don't hesitate, Ryan said, echoing Mrs. Weasley's advice. Just run straight through. If you're nervous, sprint. It's important. Harry's heart pounded. He took a deep breath and squared his shoulders. The bustling station noise faded in his ears as he stared down the barrier Ryan had pointed out. With a determined nod, Harry let his nerves go and surged forward toward his first journey into the wizarding world. From Ryan's perspective, just as Harry reached the barrier between platforms 9 and 10, a sudden surge of passengers swept in front of him. By the time the last oversized canvas backpack rolled out of the way, Harry had vanished. How clever. That's how they keep muggles from spotting new students, Ryan thought, noting that not everyone in the crowd was a wizard in robes. Some were ordinary muggles, clearly bewildered by the commotion. He took a deep breath and hurried toward where Harry had disappeared. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself standing before a gleaming crimson steam engine, billowing soft clouds of smoke. Attached to its side was a polished brass plate reading, Hogwarts Express, 11 Ockel, Ock. Turning back, he saw that the old ticket barrier had been replaced by a graceful wrought iron arch, the words Platform 94 arcing overhead in looping script. Steam mingled with the chatter of the crowd, while tabby cats wove between travelers' feet. Owls perched on trunks and shoulders, hooting in harsh, plaintive calls, and the rattle of heavy luggage wheels added to the hubbub. The first few carriages of the train were already packed. Some students leaned out of the windows to wave farewell to their families. Others giggled and fidgeted in their seats, ready for the journey south. Ryan paused for a moment, taking in the scene, a world he'd only heard about in stories now unfolding before his very eyes. Harry stood a short distance away, pushing a trolley, and waved at Ryan. On closer inspection, you could see he'd combed his hair forward to hide the scar on his forehead. Chapter 77. Cat. By 11 o'clock that morning, the Hogwarts Express was already rolling out of the station. Ryan and Harry climbed into an empty compartment and settled onto the worn velvet seats. Harry looked smaller and more fragile than usual, so thin and dainty that he might have been mistaken for a child. With Ryan's help, he dragged his battered suitcase aboard and tucked it into the corner. Ryan straightened up and glanced at Harry. "Hey, do you remember which pets you're allowed to bring?" he asked. Harry tapped his chin thoughtfully. "Owls, cats, and toads," he replied, as if reciting from memory. He'd studied the acceptance letter so many times that the details should have been second nature, yet old anxiety still made him hesitate. "And which of those do you see most often on the train?" Ryan prompted. Harry's face brightened. "Cats?" he ventured. Ryan shook his head, smiling. "Nope, owls." He paused, watching Harry's reaction. "Since we boarded, I've noticed you keep stealing glances at every cat we pass. You're not exactly comfortable around them, are you?" Harry's cheeks colored. He opened his mouth to protest, but Ryan just winked. The train rattled on, carrying them closer to a new term, and to whatever awaited them at Hogwarts. Harry settled onto the low brick wall beside Ryan, the morning sun slanting through the courtyard at Hogwarts. Every year on Dudley's birthday, like he began, my aunt and uncle whisked Dudley and a friend off to do something fun, theme parks, burgers, the movies, anything to spoil him. And who gets stuck with Mrs. Fig? That batty old lady 2 streets over. He shrugged. Her house reeks of cabbage, and all she ever does is sit me down with photo albums full of cats. Tick, Chair, Mr. Claw, Mau Mau. I've seen every one of them a dozen times. Harry hesitated. This year, Mrs. Fig broke her leg right before Dudley's big day. I know I should have felt sorry, but the moment I realized I'd have to wait another 12 months before I saw those cats, even if only in pictures, I just couldn't care. He exhaled, feeling a burden lift. Maybe that's why I've never been fond of cats. For a boy he'd only just met, spilling all this felt strangely cleansing, like stepping out of a hot bath. He looked at Ryan, half expecting a judgmental look, but found only a smirk. "Harry," Ryan said, leaning forward, "do you know why I asked you that question just now?" Harry blinked. "Why?" Ryan tapped his ear, as if listening for an answer. Ding dong ding ding. Then he slipped his hand into his school robe and drew out a tiny coal-black kitten. The kitten blinked up at Harry with curious gold-green eyes. "Meet the reason," Ryan announced proudly. "I brought a pet to school, Jerry." Harry reached out a trembling hand. As Jerry's soft fur brushed his fingers, Harry found himself smiling. Maybe, just maybe, he'd been wrong about cats all along. Jerry was curled up on the seat, purring softly, its paws tucked neatly beneath its body. Even Harry, who loathed cats, couldn't deny the creature's sleek, almost predatory grace. It felt dangerous somehow, like standing naked in a winter blizzard. Just then, the compartment's sliding door clicked open, and a boy with flaming red hair stepped inside. At first, Harry thought he'd seen Jerry vanish into the boy's coat pocket, but in reality, the cat had been nudged into a little pet bed labeled Smith Castle. "Is this seat free?" the red-haired boy asked, nodding at the bench opposite Harry. "Everywhere else is full." Harry shook his head, and the boy gave a brief, exasperated sigh, proof, it seemed, that the rumor about no seats left was true. He sat down and glanced at Harry, who'd gone rigid at the sight of the Weasley-painted carrier. In his startle, Harry bared the lightning bolt scar on his forehead. The boy's eyes went wide. "Oh my God," Harry frowned. "What is it?" The redhead opened his mouth, shut it again, and finally whispered, "Are you?" He broke off, struck mute. Chapter 7. A Chance Encounter on the Hogwarts Express. "Har, Rye Potter," Ron gasped, his eyes widening. Harry cleared his throat, suddenly self-conscious. Yes, that's me." Ron stared at him as if trying to process the revelation. Harry's cheeks warmed under the unexpected scrutiny, until a third boy in the compartment spoke up. "Hello? I'm still alive over here," said the newcomer with a friendly grin. "Ryan Smith." He gave a soft sigh and thought to himself how differently this conversation might have gone if any of them had been girls. "Ron Weasley," the red-haired boy finally managed, holding out his hand. Before they could exchange any more introductions, the compartment door slid open once more. 2 more boys, identical in looks and laughter, pushed inside. "Oi, Ron, we've got to get to the middle carriage. Lee Jordan's just opened a big bag of spiders," one of them announced, his eyes alight with mischief. He glanced around. "Is Harry Potter here?" Ron swallowed and nodded. "Yeah, he's here." The other twin chuckled and nudged his brother. "I'm Fred, by the way, and this is my twin, George. And this," he indicated Ron, "is our little brother." Fred gave Ron a playful shove, then turned back to Harry. "We'll see you two later." "Goodbye," Harry and Ron called after them as the twins darted off down the corridor. Harry let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Here on the Hogwarts Express, he was just another student. Nobody in this carriage recognized him. No gossip would spread, no curious heads would peek through sliding doors, and best of all, Draco Malfoy wouldn't be knocking on anyone's compartment. Finally, Harry could settle in and enjoy the journey to Hogwarts in peace. Ryan sat in the corner of the Hogwarts Express compartment, fidgeting with the folds of his robes. Once again, he felt invisible, his thoughts a tangle of frustration and self-reproach. Why was he so quiet? Why did he always let his nerves shrink him down? Across from him, Harry Potter and Ron Weasley were caught up in lively conversation. Ryan's shoulders tensed as he listened to their laughter and half-glimpsed jokes. He chastised himself for letting shyness rob him of a place at their table. Then, unexpectedly, Harry looked up and met his gaze. Ryan's heart skipped a beat. Had Harry really noticed him? A warm smile flickered across the chosen one's face. "Shall we close the door?" Harry asked casually. With a small wave of his wand, Ron sent the compartment door swinging shut. The bustle of the train vanished, leaving just the 3 of them in a private bubble. Ron pointed at Harry's lightning bolt scar. "So, still getting flashbacks about you-know-who?" Harry's smile faltered. He ran a hand through his dark hair and nodded. An awkward hush settled in the compartment. Then Harry turned to Ryan. "Sorry, I don't think we've actually met. I'm Harry." Ryan stood, smoothing his robes. "Ryan Lewin," he said, offering his hand. Harry shook it. Ryan's fingers tingled. He could hardly believe he was shaking hands with Harry Potter himself. "Nice to meet you, Ryan," Ron added, giving him a friendly nod. They all settled back into their seats. Harry and Ron began filling in Ryan on their journey to Hogwarts, their hopes for a winning Quidditch season, and the classes they were most excited about. After listening a while, Harry leaned forward once more. "So, Ryan, does magic run in your family?" Ryan smiled. "Every Lewin I know graduated from Ravenclaw. We're all witches and wizards." Ron snorted. "That's impressive. My family's a bit of a mix. Mum's got a distant cousin who's an accountant, no magic in him at all. We don't mention him much." Harry laughed. "We've all got that one non-magical relative." Ryan laughed too. "True enough. By the way, have you both done much magical practice before term starts?" Harry's eyes lit up. "I can't wait for charms, and maybe a bit of friendly dueling. You'll love it here." Ryan nodded, a genuine smile spreading across his face. For the first time on this journey, he felt like he belonged. Ryan stayed silent, shrinking back just enough to see eerily. Harry was following him. Finally, he said, "So, I heard you're living with Muggles now." At the word Muggles, Ron practically leapt forward. "What are they like?" he asked, eyes bright. Harry shrugged. "Honestly? Terrible. Not all Muggles are bad, but my aunt, uncle, and cousin make life miserable. I'd kill for even 3 wizard brothers." "3?" Ron frowned. "I've got 5, and they all treat me like gold. Only trouble is I never get anything new. Right now I'm wearing Bill's old robes, using Charlie's hand-me-down wand, and Percy tosses me every unwanted mouse that comes his way." He paused, then brightened. "But I didn't come empty-handed. Seen the latest issue of the Daily Prophet?" Harry shook his head, so Ron reached into his inside pocket and pulled out a gleaming card. "This is the Skywalker Gold Card, a total collector's item. In the Doraemon fandom, they call it the Devil's Passport." Harry blinked. "Skywalker? Who's that?" "He's the creator of Doraemon, hands down the greatest author ever," Ron said, cheeks pink. He looked at Harry with a mix of pity and disbelief. "You've never even heard of Doraemon?" Harry just shook his head, and Ron let out an exasperated sigh, realizing how starved his friend was for anything magical or marvelous. "Do families like this still exist?" he wondered aloud. Then he reached into the suitcase at his feet and carefully drew out a book wrapped in parchment. Chapter 78. Fortunately, the whole story had just done a backflip. Instead of fishing Scabbers out of his pocket, Ron Johnson produced the very first volume of Doraemon. His eyes lit up as he thrust it toward Harry. To Ron's surprise and secret relief, Harry dove right in, grinning from ear to ear. "This feels exactly like Luke Skywalker's first year at Jedi Primary School," Harry declared after a few pages. "Suddenly everything's new and strange, just like when I first came to Hogwarts." At that moment, Ron finally saw Harry's Muggle world struggles in a new light. Leaning forward, he said with a grin, "Okay, mate, next time someone asks what it was like growing up among Muggles, just tell them it was exactly like Luke's experience in Jedi Primary." He couldn't resist one last jab. "Although I suppose Dudley, your cousin's, bullying is nowhere near as scary as Darth Vader," he teased, earning a good-natured shove from Harry. Poor Ron. Whether he meant Ryan or himself, it didn't matter. Harry certainly wouldn't have sensed Dudley or any other lurking trouble, no matter how finely tuned his wizarding perceptions were. Satisfied with having brightened Harry's day, Ron poured himself a steaming cup of black tea and settled back to watch his friend read. He'd even borrowed a touch of Lord God, level calculation power, along with his ever-improving heart skill, to track every flicker of Harry's expression. Before long, the castle bells chimed. Lunch was served. During a lull in their journey, Harry found himself saying Voldemort aloud, something no Hogwarts student would dare do, convinced that even speaking the Dark Lord's name invited disaster. He worried he was so far behind in his studies that he'd end up buried under a stack of Doraemon comics just to catch up. Despite his anxiety, he and Ron were laughing together, writing every twist and turn of their own improvised story. Then, right at 12:30, a gentle rap on the compartment door interrupted them. A vendor they'd never met before, a friendly woman with dimples, smiled as she slid the door open. "Hello, dears," she said cheerfully. "Would you like something to eat on the train?" Harry's stomach growled so loudly it might have made her jump. He sat up straight. Ron's cheeks flushed pink as he mumbled, "I've got a sandwich, thanks." But Harry, who'd never had the chance to spend galleons on Muggle sweets, couldn't resist. He plunged his hand into his pouch and offered, without a second thought, 11 silver sickles and 7 bronze nuts. The vendor, whose name was Ryan, blinked in surprise as Harry selected an armful of treats: chocolate frogs, jelly babies, lemon drops, and fudge squares, more than enough for a small feast. Ryan hesitated. She'd expected him to buy just one of each. Instead, he'd gone for multiples of every item. Her eyes widened, but she recovered her smile. "Very good, sir," she said, ringing it up. "Enjoy." As Ryan closed the door again, Harry beamed at Ron, who could only shake his head, cheeks still warm. It seemed even on the Hogwarts Express, surprises awaited around every corner. No wonder Goyle couldn't resist the snack pile, and ended up with a nasty nip from Scabbers when he reached for a treat. Meanwhile, Ron's eyes were fixed on the spread Harry had laid out in the empty seat next to him. A mountain of Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, Bubble Flux super bubble gum, chocolate frogs, pumpkin pies, steaming pot cakes, and licorice magic wands, among other goodies. Starving, Ron glanced at Ryan, who'd been quietly sitting beside the snacks, and froze. "What are you doing here?" Ron blurted out. Harry looked up casually. "Isn't Ryan always here?" Ryan simply closed his book, took a bite of the sandwich Jack had packed for him, and gave a polite nod. Ron blinked, then turned back to the feast and pulled a sandwich from his overstuffed lunchbox. Harry, ever considerate, immediately offered to swap his pumpkin pie for Ron's sandwich. Ryan, with a small, reluctant sigh, joined in the exchange, trading a pot cake for a licorice wand. Settling together, Harry and Ron tucked into their pumpkin pies and pot cakes while Ryan nibbled his licorice. Every now and then, the two boys paused to debate the merits of chocolate frogs. Though with so many treats on the table, it was hard to settle on a favorite. This time, when Harry tapped his chocolate frog and watched the card flip up, it wasn't Albus Dumbledore staring back at him as usual, but the odd little wizard Uric, with his crooked grin and wild hair. Nearby, Mrs. Weasley and I had spread out a stack of sandwiches. But to my surprise, and theirs, both Harry and Ron ignored them completely. It didn't really bother me. I knew how rare treats were for those two. Harry had never enjoyed homemade snacks before he arrived at Hogwarts, and Ron, well, with 5 brothers and 1 sister at home, seldom got a packed lunch that generous. Seeing Ron push his own corned beef sandwich away, complaining it was too dry, I picked it up and took a bite. It was wonderful, salty, hearty, and impossibly satisfying. Ron just shook his head. "Are you sure it's that good?" he asked, but he'd clearly eaten too much of Mrs. Weasley's cooking over the summer to appreciate something simple. A little later, Harry finally flipped up his Dumbledore card, and then another, Morgan Le Fay. Then Hengist of Woodcroft, Alboric, Cess, Parather, Merlin, a coven of druids, and even the notorious cultist Cleona. Each time, he whispered the wizard's name in awe, clutching the next frog in his hand. When he'd had his fill of chocolate frogs, Harry rose and stretched out a chocolate-smeared hand toward my jar of Bertie Bott's every flavor beans. Ron called after him, grinning. "Careful with those, mate. Nobody wants earwax or liver flavor again." Harry just laughed, dug in, and popped the first bean into his mouth. And for once, even Ron leaned forward, curiosity piqued by the promise of something new. Ron leaned back against the compartment wall. "My brother George once got stuck with a bean that smelled exactly like dried beef," he muttered. "With those Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, you really never know what you'll get." A soft knock interrupted them. "Excuse me, have you seen my toad?" A round-faced boy looked in, eyes red and brimming with tears. Harry and Ron exchanged a quick glance. It had to be Neville Longbottom. Both shook their heads, and Neville's lip quivered. I've lost him again. He always manages to hop off the moment I'm not looking." Harry sprang up and patted Neville on the shoulder, soothing him until the other students quieted down. Ron rolled his eyes and muttered under his breath, "Toads, what a pain. If I'd known how fussy they are, I never would have picked one. I'd have gotten rid of it in a heartbeat." He glanced sheepishly at something in his lap. "But now that Trevor's decided to make himself at home in my coat, there's nothing I can do." Harry spotted another creature stirring beside Ron. "Scabbers, you've got a rat too?" Without a word, Ron slipped his hand into an inside pocket and produced a plump gray rat curled up fast asleep. "This is Scabbers," Ron said softly. "He's about as useful as a sleeping textbook. Dozes all day. Dad gave him to me when Percy became a prefect and was given an owl. They couldn't afford 2 owls, so Scabbers was what I got." He looked down, cheeks pink with embarrassment, and fell silent. Harry just smiled. The compartment settled into calm again, save for the soft snores of a rat and the occasional croak of a very unlikely pair of friends. Chapter 7. An Unexpected Ally. Just then, a small girl with thick, wild hair and conspicuously large front teeth pushed open the door and stepped inside. She was dressed in Hogwarts robes, and, after casting a quick glance at the Doraemon figurine Ron had hastily tucked aside, she asked as bluntly as she spoke, "Have you seen Neville's toad?" When Ron and Harry shook their heads, she simply nodded and slipped away again, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. It was a far cry from the Hermione Granger they'd read about. There, as no dramatic interruption of Ron's ill-fated wand experiment, no lecture on proper incantation, and no cringeworthy moment pointing out some mysterious smudge on his nose, a la the movies. Instead, her brief, no-nonsense question had neatly dissolved the tension in the room, and curiously, left both Harry and Ron with a warm first impression. Harry nudged Ron. "So his name's Neville, then?" Ron's eyes lingered on the closed door. "She seemed nice, but what's her name?" Harry frowned. "She didn't say." From the corner of the room, Ryan, who'd been quietly observing the exchange, shook his head in amused exasperation. The 3 boys returned to their makeshift feast, trading excited whispers. By Ryan's grown-up standards, Hermione was undoubtedly attractive, intelligent eyes, a quick confidence, but she clearly had no interest in dressing up or making a spectacle of herself. And that, they all agreed, made her all the more intriguing. She clearly bears no resemblance to Emma's on-screen Hermione. If she did, I'd have a hard time keeping my cool. Honestly, if she moved and spoke exactly like Emma Watson, I doubt I'd manage more than a stammering, star-struck fan. This isn't the scandal-plagued Miss Watson we hear about in the tabloids. This is the Hermione we fell in love with on film. If she really were that perfect, poor Penelope and Kate wouldn't stand a chance. But fortunately, that's not the case. Chapter 79. Crouch in Trouble. Ron's triumphant belch shattered the brief silence, signaling the end of their long-standing battle for the last snack. His cheeks burned scarlet at the unexpected outburst. Scrambling, he gathered the stray sandwich crumbs, scooped up the empty plates, and quietly moved them out of sight. Harry could only grin. He appreciated Ron's unfiltered honesty, a refreshing change from the polished airs of many in the wizarding world. He certainly didn't think of himself as a hero, but that didn't stop people from assuming otherwise. To steer the conversation away from embarrassing bodily noises, Ron reached for the latest issue of the Daily Prophet lying nearby. "Hey, Harry, did you catch that story about Crouch?" Harry shook his head. "Crouch? Which one?" "It all goes back to Bertha Jorkins," Ron said, flipping to the crime section. "Dad always said she was a headache, couldn't keep her nose out of anything, but her memory was razor sharp. Right after she left Hogwarts, she landed a job at the Prophet. 6 weeks later, she was snatched up by the Ministry." "Sounds like she made an impression," Harry observed. "Not in a good way," Ron continued. "Bertha kept snooping around official files, Ministry reports, personnel files, you name it. They tried moving her from department to department, thinking it'd curb her curiosity. Instead, she got herself expelled from the Department of Mysteries altogether." Ron jabbed a finger at the headline, "Crouch Under Scrutiny." Crouch was her boss there. Now the Wizengamot is talking about stripping him of his rank. The Prophet splashed his name all over the front page. Accusations of misusing power, coercion, blackmail. Nobody knows the full story yet, but it's ugly. Harry leaned forward, scanning the article. The inked letters swam before his eyes as he absorbed each scandalous allegation. "This Crouch sounds like he's in deeper trouble than I thought," Ron snorted. "If this is just the tip of the iceberg, I wouldn't want to be him when the rest surfaces." Harry slid the newspaper into his satchel. The wizarding world had plenty of villains already, but Crouch's fall from grace promised to be one of the biggest scandals in years, and Harry had a feeling it was only beginning. "Why don't you head over to another department and see if you can get into a bit more trouble?" Ludo Bagman had joked, shortly after losing a small fortune at the tables, before reluctantly hiring her. Ever since, she'd been on his books in the Department of Magical Games and Sports. I heard that once. While she was delivering paperwork, she stumbled right into Barty Crouch Jr., Ron said, eyebrows rising. You know, escaped Death Eater, last seen in Azkaban. Before she could even react, his father showed up and unleashed a memory charm so powerful she completely forgot the encounter. Memory charm? Harry echoed, frowning. Exactly, Ron nodded. But then, out of the blue, her memories snapped back. She raced to see Amelia Bones and told her everything. Next thing you know, young Crouch was carted off back to Azkaban. Word is even his old man won't talk his way out this time. Ryan, standing a little to one side, gave a faint, knowing smile but said nothing. Death Eaters, Voldemort's followers? Harry asked, a chill creeping into his voice. Azkaban, Harry repeated, as if the name alone stole his breath away. He looked at Ron, alarmed. What's wrong? Ron stared at him, wide-eyed. You just said his name. His voice was half whisper, half shout. Harry frowned. Whose? Ron shook his head, utterly bewildered. I don't know how, I've been puzzling over it for ages, but of all the people here, you're the only one it could be. He trailed off, his shock plain as he stared at Harry, as though a door had just swung wide open in his mind. Harry shook his head. I'm not calling his name because I'm brave or anything. Barty Crouch Jr., very much alive despite Azkaban's reputation, met Harry's gaze. I never even learned it, he said quietly. No name to speak. I still have so much to learn. Harry sighed. I can already tell I'll be the worst student in this class, he fretted, having completely forgotten the question he'd meant to ask. Don't worry about it, Ron said, giving Harry's shoulder a reassuring squeeze. Lots of Muggleborns pick things up fast. Ryan, sitting beside them, frowned in surprise. He hadn't expected Harry and Ron to circle back to their first-year anxieties, especially now, with a Death Eater once thought dead looming over their conversation. The entire compartment should have been buzzing about the Gringotts' break-in, but Crouch's presence had derailed them. Just then, the compartment door slid open and 3 boys stepped inside. "A hound you!" called the tallest, a pale lad with an oily grin. He swept his gaze over them. "Red hair, freckles, Weasley, right? You've got the Skywalker gold card?" Harry recognized him at once, the same boy who'd given them a hard time in Madame Malkin's robe shop. "Please apologize to Ron," Harry said quietly. The pale boy's grin faded. He narrowed his eyes. "Oh, it's you," he sneered. Draco Malfoy's first words to Harry came before classes even began. He slid through the crowd in the entrance hall and grinned. "I hear you come from a wizarding family, too. Once you're at Hogwarts, you'll quickly see that some families carry more weight than others. You don't want to end up with the wrong crowd, do you? Let's be friends, and I can help you." Before Harry could answer, the boy extended a pale hand. "Draco Malfoy," he introduced himself smoothly. Harry hesitated, but Ron lunged forward. "Harry, don't listen to him," Ron hissed, yanking Malfoy's hand away. "The Malfoys are notorious. They're all in Slytherin, the same house as that mysterious man." 2 bulky boys at Draco's shoulders, one round-faced, the other lanky, stepped forward, but Draco waved them back. Casual as you please, he turned to the round one and said, "Pince." Then he faced Ron again. "Listen, Weasley," Draco said, voice cold. "Hand over your bank card, and I'll give you 10 galleons. That's enough to keep your family fed for a fortnight." "No thanks. My interest is in your card, not your gratitude," Draco added with a mocking bow. "How dare you?" Ron exploded. "Indeed, how dare you insult the great Skywalker with your galleons?" He flushed red at his own outburst. Harry, book in hand, slammed his page shut. "Okay, that's enough. Stop interrupting me. I'm trying to read." And with that, the new school year and new rivalries began with a bang. Seeing Ron valiantly defending his reputation, Ryan couldn't just stand by. With a quiet word and a flick of his wand, the 3 Slytherins froze mid-stride, their bodies seized by an invisible force. In no time at all, they were hurtled through the air, crashing out of the doorway and along the corridor. Draco Malfoy dusted himself off, perfectly unhurt but visibly flushed. Ryan might loathe Draco's arrogance, yet he still considered him a loyal reader of his books. A rosy tint crept across Draco's pale cheeks as he corralled Crabbe and Goyle and stalked away. Before he disappeared, he fixed Ryan with a furious glare and muttered under his breath, "My father." "Ryan, how did you do that?" Ron blurted the moment the door slammed shut. Ryan closed his book with a self-satisfied smile. "You just have to read more." Their conversation was cut short by the sudden arrival of Hermione Granger. She hurried in, concern written across her face. "Ron, what happened in here?" Ron's grin turned sheepish. "Oh, it's nothing too serious. Someone tried to buy my gold card." Hermione's brow furrowed. "Wait, did you run into Malfoy again?" Ron went pale. Even at his age, he knew how dangerous it would be for Malfoy to gain any leverage over Harry. Earlier that day, Harry had told him all about their awkward encounter in Diagon Alley, and now Draco was back for more. "I've heard about the Malfoys," Ron said, his voice low. "After that mysterious man vanished, they were the first family to realign with us. Dad never bought the story that they'd been bewitched. He's convinced Lucius Malfoy jumped to the dark side without hesitation." He flushed pink, realizing that Hermione was still listening. Do you need any help from us?" he added awkwardly. Hermione arched an eyebrow. "You two should change into your robes right away. I just spoke with the driver. We'll be at Hogwarts in no time. And you didn't get into a fight on the way, did you? I don't want any trouble before we even arrive." "Thanks for looking out for us," Ron mumbled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Okay, we'll go change. By the way, what should we call you?" "Hermione Granger," she replied crisply. "I'm only here because the other students were running up and down the hallway like headless. Well, you know, there's no special relationship to speak of." She lifted her chin. Ron stared at her, utterly taken aback by her bluntness. "Oh, by the way, you've got a little smudge of dirt right on your nose. Did you notice? She's probably just shy, don't you think, Harry?" Ron teased. Chapter 80. Harry is Discovered. Dusk had settled into a deep, velvety purple as the Hogwarts Express eased around a bend. Through the window, Ryan made out the dark silhouette of rolling hills and dense forest. The familiar lurch and hiss of the brakes told him Hogwarts was near, and in a few minutes he would join its ranks. Yet excitement eluded him. Kate knew exactly which compartment he occupied, and Penelope surely did as well, but only half the usual crowd had shown up. Fred and George Weasley had barreled in first, followed by Neville Longbottom, Hermione Granger, and, much to Ryan's surprise, Draco Malfoy with his younger brother. Still no sign of Kate or Penelope. Ryan's stomach twisted. Penelope's new prefect duties must be keeping her tied up, he told himself, and Kate would soon arrive. After all, he had made a point of keeping their relationship quiet this year. He didn't want any more attention than necessary. "Please let that be it," he murmured under his breath, glancing at Ron, whose cheerful face bore the same unguarded curiosity it always did. Ryan forced a smile. First impressions mattered more than anyone realized. He thought of how Hermione had first struck Ron as bossy and odd. Only by their 4th year did he finally recognize her brilliance, and yes, admit that he thought she was pretty amazing. Ryan just hoped his own debut at Hogwarts wouldn't be similarly disastrous. The train gave one final shudder as it pulled into the station. Steam billowed up through the platform grates. Ryan braced himself, straightened his robes, and the compartment door slid open once more. Whatever awaited him on the other side, there was no turning back now. Ryan's manner was strict yet caring. Ron couldn't help thinking of his mother, Molly Weasley. There was a kindness in the way Ryan helped her classmates that put Ron entirely at ease. He didn't feel the least bit guilty about his crush on this maternal figure. With a deft flick of her wand, she transformed her own coat into the flowing black robe of a Hogwarts student. Startled, Harry and Ron hurriedly slipped out of their muggle coats and into their school uniforms. Ron couldn't help but notice how Bill's old robes strained at the shoulders and ended well above his sneakers. He'd truly grown since last year. A soft, kindly voice crackled over the train's loudspeaker. "Attention, students. We will arrive at Hogwarts in 5 minutes. Kindly leave your luggage on board. Prefects and staff will meet you on the platform." Ryan trembled with excitement. Harry, his nerves already frayed by the long journey, misread the announcement and let out a deep, relieved sigh, much to Ron's bafflement, as he remained pale and tense. Quickly collecting the half-eaten snacks scattered at their feet, Harry crouched and began stashing wrappers into his trunk. "Come on, let's get our things together. And Ryan, you're coming with us," he said, looking up with a grin. Ron exchanged a glance with Ryan. Her shy smile told him everything he needed to know. This was going to be a very interesting year at Hogwarts. Time passed swiftly, and the train finally came to a stop. Ryan and the others followed the stream of students down onto a narrow, dimly lit platform. First years, this way. Harry, over here. How are you doing? The towering figure of Hagrid loomed ahead, his lantern swaying as he scanned the crowd. When he spotted Harry standing beside Ryan, he beamed. Harry? That's you? Harry Potter! I knew it. He's on the train. There he is, the lucky lad next to Ron. Realizing the sudden attention, Ryan instinctively tried to shrink away. Passengers and fellow students alike pivoted toward Harry, pressing in with excited chatter. Relief washed over Hagrid's bearded face. He clearly hadn't expected Harry to be so well hidden, and it seemed no one recognized him until that moment. Come on, Harry, Ryan said softly, slipping his arm through Harry's to guide him forward. Around them, people still parted like the Red Sea, giving them plenty of room. Harry's eyebrows, odd up in surprise, and Ron hurried to match their pace. First years, this way! Watch your step! Hagrid called, leading the group toward the castle's waiting carriages. The glow of his lantern bobbed ahead, lighting their path into the unknown. The moment the last first years had clambered onto the little boats, Hagrid let out a relieved sigh. Right, if you're keen to catch a glimpse of Harry, you'll have to keep your eyes peeled once we reach Hogwarts. At Hagrid's words, a ripple of excited murmurs ran through the group, confirming in every student's mind that this really was the boy who lived. If it hadn't been for Ryan, leading them all safely off the platform, the first years might still be wandering around in circles under the gaslights. Hagrid guided them down a winding, narrow path, hemmed in by dense trees. The forest hushed the chatter so effectively that all anyone could hear was the soft pad of boatmen's oars, and every so often, a lonely sniffle from somewhere in the darkness. Ryan glanced back and saw Neville Longbottom wiping tears from his cheeks. His pet toad, Trevor, was nowhere to be found. Almost there. Nearly there. Hagrid kept calling over his shoulder, louder with each step, until at last he announced, Here we are. A chorus of gasps and cheers greeted their new surroundings. Directly ahead lay the great black lake, its surface smooth as glass under the moonlight. Beyond it, perched atop a windswept hill, glittered the silhouette of Hogwarts Castle, its towers and turrets outlined against a sky jeweled with stars, every window twinkling like a distant lantern. Ryan turned to Harry with a mischievous grin. So, Harry, do you know why we have to walk and then row before we actually enter Hogwarts? Harry shook his head, wide-eyed. Whatever the answer, it was clear the first glimpse of his new home would be one he'd never forget. Why? Harry blurted, startled by the sudden question. His mind went completely blank. Ryan looked back at him and said quietly, Because this is the very path walked by the 4 giants, the founders of Hogwarts. He thought to himself that it was more than a history lesson. It was an unspoken contract between the castle and its students. Over the next 7 years, they would grow alongside these ancient walls. No more than 4 in each boat, Hagrid thundered, motioning to a line of little skiffs moored at the water's edge. Harry, Ron, Neville, and Hermione climbed into one boat. Ryan drifted toward another, but nobody noticed him, nor could they, with so much excitement in the air. With a last booming shout, Hagrid shoved his own boat into the lake and climbed aboard. All aboard? He called over his shoulder. Ready, the 4 friends replied, and the boat set off in single file. Silence fell over the lake as they glided through the black-green water. None of them had ever seen Hogwarts from this vantage point before. The castle's vast silhouette stretched into the sky, its countless towers and turrets reflected perfectly on the lake's smooth surface. In that moment, it looked less like a mere school and more like a city suspended between earth and clouds, a place of wonder waiting just beyond the horizon. It was exciting and dangerous. As everyone strained to take in the sight of Hogwarts' soaring towers, a sheer cliff loomed directly overhead. Duck! Hagrid's warning cut through the chatter, and they all bent low. Thick ivy, draped like a curtain, masked a hidden entrance. With a heave, Hagrid pulled it aside, revealing a winding tunnel that led down to an underground dock, nothing at all like what Harry had seen in the movies. The floor beneath them was a tangle of gravel and worn cobblestones. Lantern in hand, Hagrid led the way up the tunnel as the others followed close behind. When they reached the little landing, Hagrid paused beside an empty boat. Stooping, he rummaged through a crate and triumphantly held up a small bundle. "Look what I found! Foley!" he exclaimed, handing it over to an overjoyed Neville. With Neville clutching his prize, the group T rest on until the flickering lantern light spilled out onto a flat, damp expanse of grass. Above them, the castle's ancient walls rose steeply. Ahead stood a wide flight of stone steps leading to a massive oak door studded with iron. Even without the swirl of magic in the air, Hogwarts felt more like a fortress than a school. Tunnels branched off in every direction, and jagged mountains and rushing rivers hemmed it in on all sides. It was the very definition of a medieval stronghold, an unbreakable city. Compared to it, even the legendary Smith's Castle seemed like a child's playhouse. And this was all before the shadow of the Dark Lord fell across the land. Thanks to the Lord God's rearrangement of the land, Smith Castle is virtually impregnable. In fact, the true fortress has slipped into another dimension. What intruders see in this world is merely a decoy, a signpost meant to distract. As long as the real castle endures and its magic remains charged, any damage inflicted on the phantom stronghold can be instantly repaired.